Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of the Ewell family. Dale Ewell was born in Ohio during the Great Depression. This challenging time in him the value of hard work and the importance of money, as he learned to appreciate every dollar he made. His family struggled financially, which likely motivated him to become determined and ambitious. Dale married Glee Michelle, a multi-talented woman, who worked as an elementary school teacher, a translator for the CIA, and served on a commission at the State Bar of California. They had 2 children, Tiffany born in 1967 and Dana in 1971. Dale's success provided the Ewell family with a comfortable life, including a home in Sunnyside, a beachfront property in Parole Dunes, luxury cars, and designer clothing. After serving in the Air Force, Dale became a successful businessman. He eventually became the president and owner of Western Piper Sales Incorporated, a company that sold small aircraft. The primary source of the Ewell income came from selling light aircraft and investing heavily in the stock market. After establishing a successful aviation business, Dale expanded into buying several farms, accumulating substantial wealth. Together, Dale and Glee were worth an estimated $8 million, embodying the American dream. Despite their wealth, they lived modestly. Their children chose different directions in life. Tiffany pursued a similar career to her parents, whereas Dana chose a distinctly different route. At university, Dana presented himself as a successful entrepreneur, falsely claiming to be the source of his family's wealth. This fabricated story gained attention from a local newspaper and was even included in his school yearbook. In 1990, while attending Santa Clara University, Dana was fixated on wealth and luxury. He owned a BMW and had access to funds, allowing him to indulge in expensive items like jewelry. From a young age, Dana had a habit of lying and making up stories. Despite being intelligent and well-educated, Dana's ambitions went beyond comfort, wealth, and a promising future. He had the same ambitions as his father, but he didn't have the drive to achieve them in a proper and lawful way. Dana began fabricating elaborate and false stories about his accomplishments and importance while he was a student at the University of Santa Clara. He lied to both faculty and peers, claiming he was the head of a multi-million-dollar company. His false narrative included starting as a stockbroker at 18, moving to aircraft sales, and eventually becoming president of his own aircraft manufacturing company. The tension between Dana and his father, Dale, was largely unknown to others. Dana's tall tales may have caused his father embarrassment and contributed to their conflicts. Despite Dale's humble beginnings and generous support for his children, Dana seemed to have an excessive sense of entitlement. Dana Ewell presented himself as excessively self-centered and arrogant, prioritizing his wealth and social standing above all else. On Easter Sunday, April 19, 1992, the weather in Sunnyside, California was mild with partial sunshine, resulting in a pleasant afternoon. Dale, 59, spent the Easter weekend at his beach house with his 57-year-old wife, Glee, and their 24-year-old daughter, Tiffany. Glee and Tiffany returned to their home in Sunnyside by car, while Dale flew his private plane to his hangar and then drove home. When they arrived, they were ambushed. Tiffany was shot in the head and killed, followed by Glee, who was shot multiple times. The killers stayed in the house, waiting for Dale to arrive. 30 minutes later, Dale arrived home and was also fatally shot as he entered the house from the garage. 2 days later, Dana, the youngest member of the family, tried to contact his parents but was unable to reach them. Dana had spent the Easter weekend in San Francisco with his girlfriend and her father, an FBI agent. On April 21, 1992, the family's housekeeper, Juanita, arrived at the house for work and found Tiffany's body lying in a pool of blood in the kitchen. Juanita was distraught and sought help from a neighbor, who called the police. Meanwhile, Dana was still in Monterey, California. At the time of the murders, Dana was contacted by the authorities. His girlfriend's father quickly arranged for him to fly to Fresno, and Dana was visibly upset during this time. The police then started a thorough investigation, spending many days collecting evidence and interviewing witnesses. The crime scene was made to look like a robbery. However, experienced detectives believed the scene was deliberately staged to make it appear as though the family had been attacked and then killed by an intruder. Upon further examination, detectives found several irregularities, including the lack of weapons, bloodstains, footprints, or DNA evidence. Instead, the detectives found that the attack was carefully planned and carried out. The attacker was a skilled shooter, missing only one shot, and had even picked up the spent bullet casings inside the house. Investigators found a box of 9mm ammunition that Dale had purchased. It was later discovered that it had been used in the murder. The home appeared to have been ransacked, but nothing valuable was missing. There was no evidence of forced entry, and the alarm, which was usually turned on, had been turned off. Investigators thoroughly examined the victims' backgrounds, searching for any clues that might be connected to their deaths. They looked into Dale's past dealings, which included selling airplanes to an individual later convicted of drug smuggling in the 1970s, and a questionable real estate transaction with Dale's brother that potentially put investors at risk of losing millions. The police thoroughly investigated and eliminated all other potential suspects with motives, ultimately they concentrating on Dana, as he was the one who would benefit the most from the tragic event. As the only surviving member of the Ewell family and the main beneficiary of the estate, Dana naturally became a person of interest. Even though he had a solid alibi, having been with his girlfriend and her FBI agent father at the time of the murders, the police couldn't shake their suspicions about him. Dana's actions did not ease the concerns of others, but rather intensified their suspicions about his involvement in the murder. Although he outwardly showed distress and even offered a $50,000 reward for the capture of the killer, his grief seemed insincere. His reaction to the horrific killing of family members seemed surprisingly subdued, as he displayed little of the shock and sorrow that people typically exhibit in response to such a traumatic event. Instead of focusing on mourning the loss of his loved ones, Dana seemed more concerned with his parents' wills and inheritance. He did something disturbing, inviting a friend to view the house while there was still obvious blood on it, demonstrating a disregard for the victims. Furthermore, he allegedly expressed contempt for the police investigation, calling the investigators dummies who would never solve the case. Dana eluded authorities for 3 years, during which time they thoroughly investigated every lead to help solve the case. The situation worsened after Dale's brothers reported Dana to the authorities, claiming he had done something wrong. According to them, Dana became furious when he heard the will being read, as he learned that he wouldn't have full access to the $8 million estate until he was in his 30s. Dana reportedly slammed his hands on the table and screamed, asking why his father could do this to him. The trust stipulated that his parents would cover his expenses until he was 25, then he would receive investment dividends until he was 30. At 30, he would have access to half of the estate, with the remaining half available at 35. Before the funeral, the Ewell brothers act to prevent Dana from reclaiming what he believes is his. However, Dana managed to obtain around $300,000 from an insurance policy. Dana's uncles actively prevented him from inheriting his father's assets, causing him significant frustration. Despite the growing scrutiny from investigators and accusations from his own family members that he was involved in the murder to gain control of the family estate, Dana showed no signs of worry. He continued to live a lavish lifestyle, showering his girlfriend Monica with expensive gifts and even helping with her education costs. However, it was unclear where his money was coming from. Investigators suspected that money was a key factor in the murders and dug deeper. They discovered that Dana had been stealing money from various sources, including his grandmother's trust account, which had held $400,000. By the time detectives stepped in, the grandmother was left with only $22,000 to cover her care at a nursing home. The discovery that Dana had been exploiting his grandmother for personal gain further strengthened the police's suspicions about his character. However, authorities still need concrete evidence to prove Dana's involvement in the murder. Joel, one of Dana's college acquaintances, was particularly drawn to Dana's stories of a wealthy, successful lifestyle. Joel found Dana's apparent ability to effortlessly attract beautiful women especially intriguing. People around were surprised by their friendship, as they seemed to have little in common. Dana was driven by a desire for higher social status, while Joel's interests lay in video games, firearms, and explosives. Despite their differences, Joel's friendship with Dana gave him the opportunity to attend fancy parties and meet attractive women. Shortly after the Ewell family murders, Joel dropped out of school and soon became Dana's roommate in the Ewell family's former home. This marked a significant development in the investigation. Both Dana and Joel started making unusual purchases, such as helicopter flying lessons, despite Joel having no apparent source of income. As a result, investigators began surveilling both, monitoring their communications through pagers and payphones. Authorities cloned Dana's pager and tapped his landline in May 1993. An officer overheard Joel discussing the investigation on a payphone, saying, "They don't have evidence, they'll try to catch you in a lie." Meanwhile, Dana continued spending lavishly, buying a new car for his girlfriend and paying her law school tuition. After using up the insurance payout, he took $400,000 from his grandmother's account, leaving her with only $22,000 for her nursing home expenses. In 1994, investigators shifted their focus to forensic analysis, which revealed that the murder weapon was a rare 9mm assault rifle made in Colorado. Records from the company showed that a rifle had been bought by Innes Jack Pond just before April 1992. Notably, Jack was a high school friend of Joel. When questioned, Jack first denied buying the rifle, then claimed he bought it as a birthday present for himself, and said the gun was later stolen. The evidence against Dana and Joel continued to mount. At one point, detectives visited Dana at his university dorm and told him they believed Joel was responsible for killing his family. Dana stayed silent, visibly pale. After the detectives departed, Dana and his girlfriend, Monica, promptly contacted Joel's brother, Radovic, but they did not realize that they were being followed by the police. On March 2, 1995, police arrested Dana, Joel, and Peter, Joel's brother, and Jack Pond. Peter had made a deal with the authorities, agreeing to testify against his younger brother and Dana in exchange for immunity. Peter confessed to the police that he had made a homemade silencer and attached it to the murder weapon. He also admitted to getting rid of the gun barrel, Joel's tennis shoes, and some gun magazines. Peter said he did these things with the help of Jack Pond. When Jack was arrested, he gave a different account of the gun. He said he bought the gun for Joel but didn't know it was going to be used for the murders. Jack also confirmed that he and Peter had disposed of evidence together. Jack received immunity in exchange for his testimony, just like Peter. As a result of statements made by Peter and Jack, the barrel of the murder weapon was found buried in a field in Rica. Unlike Peter and Jack, Dana and Joel were not offered plea deals. They were charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder with special circumstances, which made them eligible for the death penalty. The trial began in late 1997. Dana and Joel, who had previously been close friends and had even lived together in the house where the murders occurred, now had separate lawyers and took different stances during the trial. Prosecutors argued that Dana's motive for the murders was greed, claiming he had promised Joel a share of the inheritance. Dana's lawyer argued that he was innocent, suggesting that Joel and Jack had planned and carried out the murders. Joel's lawyer acknowledged the strong evidence against his client and focused on trying to save him from the death penalty. During the trial, Jack Pond testified that he had bought the murder weapon for Joel and helped dispose of it. He also said Joel had given him details of the incidents on the day of the murder, in April 1992. According to Jack, Dana had asked Joel for a favor that he found hard to refuse. Having taken steps to avoid leaving DNA evidence behind, Joel carried out Dana's plan by entering the Ewell residence. He shaved off all body hair and then waited 12 hours on a plastic sheet to minimize the risk of leaving any traces, including an eyelash. He was also instructed to retrieve all bullet casings. Tiffany was shot in the back of the head and died instantly, without seeing her killer. Glee, however, saw Joel and tried to escape to the office, but was shot and severely injured. Joel pursued her and eventually killed her. During the trial, it was revealed that Joel had shot Glee multiple times at close range, and that she had recognized him as a friend of Dana's who had visited the family a month earlier. After killing Glee, Joel reloaded his gun and put on new gloves, then waited for Dale to arrive, whom he also murdered. On May 27, 1998, after an 8-month trial, the jury delivered a finding Dana Ewell and Joel guilty on all charges. However, they could not agree on the sentencing. 2 votes saved Joel from the death penalty, while Dana escaped the death penalty by just 1 vote. In the end, both received 3 consecutive life sentences without parole. Dana was imprisoned at Corcoran State Prison, 50 miles south of Fresno. He was among inmates like Charles Manson. His grandmother, whom he stole from, died in 1999. Dana claims to have undergone a spiritual transformation and become a Christian while in prison. Joel was imprisoned at Mule Creek State Prison in Ione, California. Meanwhile, Jack Pond pursued a career in law, becoming an attorney. Monica Zent broke up with Dana, finished law school, and established a successful law practice. Although Monica was thoroughly investigated, no evidence connected her to the crime. The only suspicious aspects were her initial unwillingness to cooperate and that some of the funds were used to help pay for her law school expenses. Dana Ewell's actions can be summed up by 3 words: greed, entitlement, and heartlessness. His extreme desire for wealth led him to manipulate and betray those closest to him, ultimately leading to the tragic deaths of his family members. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Isla Reynolds. Isla Reynolds was born on April 4, 2010 in Waterville, Maine, USA. She is a beautiful girl with blonde hair, blue eyes, and a cute smile. Her parents, Trista Reynolds and Justin DiPietro, had a brief relationship in the summer of 2009, which resulted in Trista becoming pregnant. However, Justin suspected that he was not the father of the child. When Trista gave birth to Isla, Justin took a paternity test in July 2010, which confirmed that Isla was his daughter. As a result, he was ordered by Child Protective Services to pay child support in December of that year. Trista and Justin agreed that Isla would be raised by Trista. Trista and her daughter live in Portland. It wasn't until mid-2011, after Isla's first birthday, that Justin began visiting her. He lived an hour and a half away, and Justin would visit Isla during the day. Trista and Justin agreed that Justin could take Isla out, but not stay overnight. After a while, Trista got a new boyfriend, Raymond. Trista became pregnant, and in 2011, the family welcomed a new member. Trista would raise both children. Everything changed on October 13, 2011, when Trista met with Child Protective Services. The details of the complaint that led to the meeting remain unclear, but it is known that Trista had a substance abuse problem. That day, officials gave Trista a choice. Trista would go to rehab, or she would lose custody of the children. Trista immediately entered a 10-day rehab program and left her daughter with her mother and sister. Trista was determined not to lose custody. By October 2011, Justin had seen Isla about 5 to 10 times. However, just 4 days after Trista began rehab, on October 17th, Justin and his family decided they wanted to take custody of Isla. Justin's mother, Phoebe DiPietro, contacted Child Protective Services and was approved to adopt Isla. Child Protective Services quickly notified Trista's relatives of their decision. After being granted permission, Justin and his family picked up Isla but did not know her exact address. Child Protective officials provided the location through police officer Charles Weaver, who accompanied Justin and Justin's mother Phoebe to the home of Isla's aunt, Jessica. Justin's mother Phoebe waited in the car while Justin and the police entered the house to pick up Isla. A tense situation occurred. Isla's mother Jessica begged the police not to take Isla away and warned that she would not hand over the child to anyone. The police observed that Isla was very happy, constantly laughing and playing. However, when Justin appeared, Isla began to cry and tried to move away from him. Despite this, the police officer still handed the child over to Justin. When Isla was handed over to Justin, she struggled and screamed. She even tried to bite the officer. Child Protective Services supervisor Charles was told by the officer that Isla hated her father and that they could not give the child to Justin. But Charles said that it was not his decision. He was just there to carry out Child Services orders. For Justin to have formal custody of Isla, he would have to get the consent of Isla's mother, Trista, or go through a court process to have the child approved by a judge. In this case, there was no agreement or court process. Instead, the Child Protective Services supervisor's decision to place the child was valid. Child Protective Services supervisor Charles gave custody of Isla to Justin. He then took Isla to the house in Waterville where he lived with his 47-year-old mother, Phoebe, his 24-year-old sister, Alicia, and Elisha's daughter, Gabriella. Justin, 25, lived in a large room in the partially finished basement, while the rest of the family lived upstairs. During this time, Trista called Justin every day to talk to Isla. On October 20, 2011, while Trista was in treatment, a meeting was held to discuss Isla's case. Attendees included Child Protective Services, 2 doctors, Trista and her sister Jessica, and their attorneys. Justin also attended the meeting by phone. The meeting resulted in an agreement that Isla would be returned to her mother on October 22, 2011, immediately after Trista completed her drug treatment program. In addition, Justin agreed to take Isla to the treatment center on the 21st to visit her mother. Initially, things went well for Trista. However, the decision was reversed. In her desperation to get her daughter back, Trista called Child Protective Services several times to ask them to help enforce the agreement. Unable to reach them, Trista attempted to negotiate with Justin to reach a temporary agreement. Under the agreement, Justin would continue to care for Isla and Trista would be allowed regular visits. On November 12, 2011, Justin took Isla to the emergency room. After a doctor examined her, they determined that Isla had a fractured elbow. According to Justin, the accident occurred the night before, November 11th. It was raining at the time and Justin believed that he had slipped and fallen on her while holding her on the porch. Initially, Justin thought that she was not seriously injured because although she was crying, she seemed fine. However, it was not until the next morning that Justin noticed that Isla had injured her hand, so he took her to the hospital. By the following Monday, the orthopedist concluded that surgery was not necessary and that Isla's injury would heal on its own. A week later, on November 26, during Isla's third visit, the specialist said that Isla's condition was improving and that she was slowly recovering. Trista was at the hospital to monitor her daughter's health. Never thought that this would be the last time Trista would hold her daughter in her arms. From that moment on, things went from bad to worse. Tired of fighting over custody, visitation rights, and even the right to talk to her on the phone, Trista filed a lawsuit to gain custody of her daughter. On December 15, 2011, Trista filed a lawsuit for custody of Isla. Custody of Isla was awarded to her just 2 days later on Saturday, December 17. Justin called the police in the morning to report Isla missing from his mother's house, where he was staying with his girlfriend Courtney Roberts and sister Alicia. Justin assured them that the police had put Isla to bed the night before and that when they woke up, Isla had disappeared early that morning. Trista travels to a coastal town in Maine to visit her boyfriend Raymond. She falls asleep on the couch while Raymond's father, Robert, drives. When Robert received a call from Trista's father informing him that Isla was missing, Robert was shocked and found a suitable place to stop the car and wake Trista. Trista was still sleepy, but when she heard her father's voice herself, she began to understand that she had no idea where her daughter was. In desperation, Trista changed direction to look for Isla. The trip to the police station lasted an hour, but for Trista, it felt like a century. She called Justin several times to find out what had happened, but there was no response. When they got to the police station, both Trista and her father-in-law Robert gave statements. After about 30 minutes, Trista's father arrived at the police station with them, angry and upset. Justin called 911 on Saturday morning at 8:49 to report Isla missing. He said he last saw Isla the night before at 10 p.m., when his sister Alicia checked on Isla before going to bed. However, when they woke up the next morning, they discovered that Isla had disappeared from her crib. Justin suspected that an unknown intruder had taken Isla. News of Isla's disappearance quickly spread to the police. The sheriff told the media that the case was being actively investigated and their goal was to find Isla at all costs. Police continued to search the house for more clues. On Sunday, December 18th, police dogs were deployed and searched the area around the house where Isla was. Trista's house also underwent a thorough search. On Monday, December 19th, the FBI requested assistance in the search. By this time, 75 people from various agencies were involved in the search. The state police had seized 2 vehicles. One was a 1996 Ford Explorer, owned by Justin, and the other was a silver car, owned by Justin's girlfriend Courtney, who was also present on the night of the disappearance. On Wednesday evening, Justin made his first statement to the media. He was calm and claimed he did not know what happened to Isla. Justin also said that he and his family would support the investigation and do everything possible to find Isla. Justin said that Trista had agreed to let him raise the child. Justin also said that Trista was incapable of caring for Isla. As of day 10, a $30,000 reward has been offered for anyone who can provide a lead to Isla's rescue, and 330 leads have been followed. The operation also involved about 50 volunteers from the Search and Rescue Association. The sheriff has transferred the investigation to the state police's Major Crimes Unit. At that time, an announcement was made that the case was no longer a search for a missing girl but was being treated as a criminal investigation. In the early days, Justin tried to avoid the media but later appeared more frequently. During an appearance on the Today's Show, Justin claimed that Isla had been kidnapped and wanted the kidnapper to return Isla. When asked about Justin's silence in the early days of Isla's disappearance, he justified himself by saying that he thought Isla would return. He also claimed that the police had advised him to stay away from the press. The police explained that this was only told to him at first. Later, the police encouraged Isla's parents to continue to appear in public. In late January, police revealed a major discovery. Isla's blood was found in multiple locations throughout Justin's home. In his 1996 Ford Explorer, they discovered a child's seat in the back with Isla's blood on the left shoulder strap. In Isla's bedroom, Police found blood on some of Isla's princess pink sneakers on the floor next to the crib, as well as on the doll's face and arms. This suggests that Isla may have tried to clean the blood from her mouth with her toy. Additionally, a blood stain was found on the living room sofa. Most of the blood stains were concentrated in the basement. A pool of Isla's blood stained the center of the mattress that Justin shared with Courtney. Justin's sneakers were also found with Isla's blood on them. Police also discovered blood splatters on the cement floor around the bed and on the walls. These splatters matched Isla's height. Additionally, experts determined that some of the blood splatters in the house were likely caused by Isla coughing, suggesting that Isla's injuries were both internal and external. This suggests that Isla may have been severely injured and may have been brutally attacked. Police said the bed sheet was used to clean Isla's blood. When they learned this information, Trista and her family were shocked and could not believe it. Police warned them that the evidence that was about to be revealed would be even more horrifying. Luminol tests were performed on the house, revealing blood stains that were not visible to the naked eye. Photos taken at the scene left Trista in great pain. After viewing these photos, she left the police station in a state of panic. The police said there were more photos to show her, but Trista refused to see them. She said she had enough. According to reports, when police showed Justin and his family the photos, he had no reaction. After learning of the police information, Trista shared with the press that despite her feelings of grief and helplessness, Isla's father, Justin, Alicia, and Courtney were still walking down the street as if nothing had happened. In September 2013, Trista wrote a bombshell letter to the press about the evidence and photos she had been given by the police. She was tired of waiting and wanted to rekindle public interest in Isla's case. In the spring of 2016, a group of journalists went to Justin's mother's house. Alicia opened the door and the journalists asked about the blood evidence. Justin's mother explained that Isla was lactose intolerant and had been vomiting. However, a quick internet search shows that common symptoms of lactose intolerance are gas, bloating, abdominal pain, and diarrhea, while nausea and vomiting are listed, but they are not the most common symptoms, let alone vomiting blood. Then, in 2017, at Trista's request, a judge officially declared Isla dead. Based on her father, Justin, reporting that Isla had gone missing on December 17, 2011, Trista and her attorney then filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Justin. By that time, Justin had disappeared, and he and his attorneys denied any wrongdoing, arguing that there was no concrete evidence. Earlier this year, 2023, a judge granted Trista's petition to include Phoebe and Alicia in the wrongful death lawsuit. Justin is facing civil charges for murder. Additionally, Justin faces charges of breach of parental duty of care for a minor. Both Trista and her attorney know that they will not receive any financial compensation from Justin. That is not the goal of the lawsuit. Their goal is to get information and facts out. There are many strange things about Isla's disappearance. While Isla was with Justin, he called the friend who sold him a $25,000 life insurance policy on Isla a few weeks ago. It is worth noting that Justin stayed at this friend's house while detectives investigated Isla's disappearance. Claimed that Justin had not been involved in the child's life during the 9 months of pregnancy and when Isla was just over a year old. Trista also revealed that she had received strange messages from Justin on the day he brought Isla home. He mentioned being afraid that someone would try to kidnap or take Isla away. The last time he said something similar was around December 11th, 6 days before Isla was reported missing. After Isla went missing, the messages became more surprising and confusing. The end of the case. Poor Isla is still not found. Those responsible for Isla's death. Still no punishment. Hi there, investigators. It's time to uncover the truth behind another case. The case of Xavier Dupont de Ligons. Xavier Dupont de Ligons, born March 9, 1961. He is the eldest son of the French Count Bernard Hubert Dupont de Lignes and his wife, Geneviève. Xavier had a younger sister named Christine. Xavier's parents were very wealthy. Xavier's mother, Geneviève, claimed to have received messages from the divine, which she wrote down during her creative writing sessions. Her strange beliefs developed into teachings about the impending apocalypse, and she founded a religious sect called the Church of Philadelphia. The group consisted of members of the aristocracy, whom Geneviève believed would survive the apocalypse and participate in the renewal of the world. Despite his father's aristocratic title, Xavier had little interest in the French tradition. Instead, he was fascinated by luxury, high-end cars, and Xavier loved the United States. Xavier's lavish lifestyle was financed by his mother through substantial donations from members of the sect, who vowed to keep their activities secret. In 1974, Xavier met Emmanuel Teneur on the beautiful island of Bra. They formed a friendship based on mutual understanding and respect. It is said that at that time, Emmanuel confessed his feelings to Xavier, but despite his rejection, their close friendship remained unchanged. 2 years later, Xavier met Agnes Hodanger in Neuilly, a suburb of Paris. Agnes was born on November 9, 1962, and Agnes was deeply religious. She worked as an assistant at the Blanche de Caze Catholic School in Nantes, where she taught catechism. Although information about Agnes' family is not widely available, there are many sources that indicate that Xavier and Agnes formed a very close relationship. The relationship developed into a short-lived romance before they decided to separate. In 1990, Agnes gave birth to her first child, Arthur, from a non-coercive relationship. Soon after, she and Xavier got back together, rekindled their love, and decided to marry. Xavier adopted Arthur as his son. 2 years after the breakup, they welcomed the birth of their second son, Thomas, who was considered the heir to the family. To commemorate this important event, Xavier chose Emmanuel as the first person to support Thomas. After Thomas, the couple had 2 more children, Anna and Benoit. The family of 6 lived happily. Xavier showed himself to be a loving father and his children excelled in school, opening up a promising future. Agnes passed on her faith to her children and took them to church. Around 2000, in accordance with their interests and wishes, Xavier moved his family to the United States. Xavier, a reserved, charismatic, and multilingual man, believed he could easily integrate into the United States. However, this project failed, resulting in significant financial loss. Upon returning to France, Xavier was left in a large amount of debt after several failed business ventures. Xavier was described as a salesman in some investigations. According to French media reports, financial problems had been a major concern for Xavier for many years. One of Xavier's failed projects was the importation of plans from the United States into French. In addition, Xavier also started a small business but found only limited success. These businesses included hotel and restaurant guides for sales representatives, a loyalty system for restaurants, and an association called the French Federation of Commerce. Xavier was also listed as the manager of another business that has not been clearly disclosed. Eventually, the business's accounts were few, and by 2003, Xavier had hired 6 sales staff. Xavier's work was often Monday through Friday and brought in less than $4,200 in reported annual income. The mounting financial problems began to strain Xavier's marriage, perhaps due to the usual disagreements in marriage. In 2004, Agnes wrote on a French forum about the challenges she and her husband faced, notably that Xavier had told her that the collective death of the entire family would not be a disaster. The financial situation worsened, and by 2009, the mounting debt had taken a serious toll on their relationship, forcing them to temporarily separate. During this time, Xavier sent Agnes several letters blaming her for the family's difficulties and the debts they were facing. This emotional stress affected Agnes, causing her to lose her sense of direction and suffer from insomnia. During this difficult time, Xavier sought help from his friend Emmanuel, who came from a wealthy family and had inherited a fortune from his father. Emmanuel was always ready to help Xavier financially. Emmanuel not only lent Xavier money, but also financed his trips and co-signed the purchase of a house. With Emmanuel's help, the Xavier family lived in a small wooden house on the outskirts of Nantes in the late 2000s. However, after settling down, the neighbors found Agnes to be stubborn and not easily put up with her husband. But behind closed doors, Agnes faced personal problems. She felt Xavier was too slow and unloving, and sometimes even abusive towards Agnes. She was also frightened by the way Genevieve, her mother-in-law, controlled Xavier. She described Genevieve as a mentally ill mystic and was extremely fearful. On January 20th, 2011, Xavier's father Bernard died. Xavier hoped that his father's death would result in an inheritance, which would help him solve his financial problems. However, Xavier was shocked. When he went through his father's possessions, he found nothing of significance. The remaining items included a few pieces of paper, a rifle, a name tag, a ring, and some cash, which Xavier promptly took. A few hours after his father's death, Xavier withdrew cash using his father's card. On February 2nd, he obtained a gun license, and on March 12th, he purchased a silencer for his rifle. During this time, he practiced shooting a rifle in the garden, looking at a balloon on a support stand. Emmanuel visited and tried shooting, finding nothing unusual. Xavier explained that the silencer was to avoid disturbing the neighbors. On Friday, April 1st, Xavier and Emmanuel went to a shooting range together, where Xavier's rifle was the focus of attention. The next day, Emmanuel called Xavier 5 times and they talked for almost an hour. Sunday, April 3rd. That night, Xavier, Agnes, and their children watched a movie and had a nice dinner at a restaurant. Everyone in the family was there, except Thomas, who was studying at a Catholic school and living in a nearby dormitory. After the outing, the family returned home and were seen by neighbors. Some family members also exchanged text messages with friends and acquaintances. That night, Xavier used drugs to put his wife and children to sleep, then shot and buried them in the garden. He did the same thing with the family's Labrador. Xavier called Agnes's workplace and said she was sick. He then contacted Arthur's school and said Arthur had been in a motorbike accident. He then contacted Anne and Benoit's school and said they were sick. In the afternoon, Xavier sent a letter to the restaurant where Thomas worked, saying that Thomas would resign because his father had been transferred to Australia. However, Xavier still had to deal with Thomas. On Monday, April 4th, Xavier contacted Thomas and had dinner with him at a restaurant near Thomas's university dormitory. After the meal, Thomas returned to his room exhausted. The next day, Thomas received an urgent text message from his father, saying that Agnes had been in a bicycle accident and was in a coma at the hospital, prompting Thomas to go to Nantes immediately. At midnight, a friend of Thomas's received a text message from him, saying that he was at home watching a movie with his father. Thomas was probably dead by then. About an hour later, Xavier emailed Emmanuel, arranging to meet up soon. Emmanuel responded, reminding Xavier that he had the power of attorney and the keys on the boat. Xavier went in and out of his house and even left a note on the door asking for no more mail to be delivered. Xavier then withdrew cash from an ATM, which was captured on security cameras. He paid with credit cards at restaurants and stayed at hotels under his real name. As Xavier's perfect escape began, the neighbors began to notice worrying signs. The once open windows of the bungalow had been boarded up for days. The 4 children of the Xavier family were no longer seen playing outside. The dogs were no longer heard barking, and Agnes was nowhere to be seen. All disappeared without a trace. Concerned neighbors began investigating and contacted the police. When police arrived, they discovered a nearly empty refrigerator with only a few jars of jam left. In the kitchen, a mop still had food on it, and a ring was placed on the living room table. Guitars were on the sofa, but no one was home. Police found empty picture frames, and the closet was empty of clothes. In the midst of the mystery, on April 9th, a letter appeared, sent to Xavier's family and friends. The letter claimed that Xavier had been hired by the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration and that the family had gone undercover as part of a witness protection program, explaining why they had suddenly disappeared and had not communicated. Suspicion and concern grew among neighbors who sensed something was amiss. Fearing for the family's lives, they urged the police to investigate further. As the case gained media attention, more details emerged. On April 15th, security cameras captured Xavier entering a small hotel near Cannes. He parked his car, picked up a bag, and disappeared into nearby woods. This was the last time he was seen. Police returned to the family home Xavier on April 21, 2011. There, they discovered a new plot of land under the terrace. When they dug, police found the bodies of Agnes and her 4 children. Each had been shot 2 to 3 times and were wrapped in bags, covered with religious symbols, and carefully buried in sacks of quicklime. The family's 2 Labrador retrievers were also found buried. Despite a thorough search, no traces of blood, fingerprints, or DNA were found. Xavier became the most widely circulated person in France because of his alleged murder. His image appeared on every news bulletin. However, it seems that Xavier has mysteriously disappeared from the face of the earth. Autopsy results of 5 victims showed most of the bullets were shot in the head. In addition, traces of sedatives were found in the bodies of the children, which confirmed the hypothesis that they attacked while they were sleeping. A remarkable detail began to appear around Agnes. In the master bedroom, police discovered a device that Agnes used to control her sleep apnea, which had stopped working at 3:27 a.m. on April 4th. Because of the close relationship between Xavier and Emmanuel was called in for questioning by the police. Emmanuel cooperated with initial investigations. When Emmanuel was questioned about the exported rifle, Emmanuel initially knew about it. However, upon further investigation, the police discovered many inconsistencies in Emmanuel's testimony. They soon realized that Emmanuel was not being completely truthful. A crucial step occurred 24 hours later. Just before noon, Nantes police raided Emmanuel's apartment and seized Emmanuel's laptop. Emmanuel then revealed the real information about Xavier's export rifle. Xavier's mother Genevieve also attracted the attention of the police during their interviews. Genevieve was evasive and denied any knowledge of the Philadelphia church. The police investigation was fruitful. They discovered a copy of a complaint filed years ago by former members of the cult who fled in fear after Genevieve offered to have sex with all the men to conceive. This revelation about the cult, including the wealthy members who provided financial support, led the police to believe that this environment may have provided Xavier with material support. As a result, all former members of the Philadelphia church were questioned, and the police monitored the cult members, hoping to detect any indiscretions in conversations or emails. When the police examined the computer hard drive, they discovered many email exchanges between Emmanuel and Xavier. Some of the emails were particularly revealing about the relationship between the two. One email sent in the early morning of April 6 attracted special attention from the police. These accumulated details led investigators to the crime in which Emmanuel may have assisted Xavier in his escape. However, the police team's work has yielded results. They discovered a copy of a petition obtained years ago by former members of the sect. These people fled in fear after Christine offered to have sex with all the men to identify the chosen tie. The important revelation about this sect, including the wealthy members who provided the main financial support, has helped investigators better understand the work. They believe that this environment may have provided Xavier with the necessary support and substance. Therefore, all former members of the Philadelphia church were examined and followers of the sect were followed, hoping to find connections through conversations or emails. Despite efforts, no murder weapon was found. Xavier's cell phone records helped police track his movements in the country. Xavier's last known trace was recorded on April 15 from a security log. Based on the type of bag Xavier was carrying, police suspected that he may have been carrying a weapon. While everything suggested that Xavier might have committed suicide in the forest, the police conducted a thorough search of the dense forest, but without any results. This led to the hypothesis that Xavier might have sailed the boat to another country. Therefore, an international arrest warrant was issued on May 4. The Nantes police contacted the National Fisheries Monitoring Center to verify whether Emmanuel or Xavier owned a motorboat or a sailboat. The police did not find sufficient information, but Emmanuel was summoned to the Nantes police station for further questioning. When the police asked Emmanuel about the sailboat, Emmanuel claimed it was a coincidence. Emmanuel explained that Emmanuel had given Explorer permission to open his safe in case anything happened to Emmanuel, and that the key to the safe was hidden in a model sailboat in an apartment. According to Emmanuel, the safe contained Emmanuel's will. Despite some suspicious coincidences, the police released Emmanuel. At this point, Emmanuel was only considered a witness. However, the police decided to put pressure on Emmanuel because they suspected that Emmanuel was a possible accomplice. A key discovery was made when police examined all the checks paid to Xavier's company. A $4,200 check signed by Emmanuel, linked to a previously undisclosed bank account in Monaco. Police quickly requested account records, but due to Monaco's strict banking secrecy laws, they would only respond to requests from their own regulators. On September 28, 4 police officers returned to Emmanuel's home. After a long wait, Emmanuel showed up. Emmanuel's apartment was sparsely furnished, with empty liquor bottles scattered around, suggesting that Emmanuel lived a very isolated life. Emmanuel told the police that Emmanuel had not received any letters or phone calls from Xavier. In 2015, a journalist claimed to have received a letter from Xavier stating he was alive. However, after conducting handwriting, DNA, and fingerprint analyses, the letter did not provide any new information. A tip-off about a monk resembling Xavier led police to raid a monastery in Rab Brun sur Aran on January 9, 2018. After a thorough 2-hour search, they concluded it was a case of mistaken identity. Then, on January 18, 2019, Emmanuel died of a heart attack. That same year, authorities arrested a man they believed to be Xavier at Glasgow Airport in Scotland, only to discover it was a case of mistaken identity. Speculation has it that Xavier may be hiding in South America, specifically Argentina, where Xavier can help him avoid being noticed. Despite the passing of the years, the Church of Philadelphia still exists, with members who have been part of the church for nearly 40 years, living in seclusion from the world. Since 2011, the case has been shrouded in rumors and speculation, causing it to stall. Ultimately, Xavier was never found. The perpetrators responsible for the deaths of Agnes and her 4 children have still not been found. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Michael Wayne Jones. Michael Wayne Jones was born on May 1, 1981, in Brattleboro, Vermont. His life was complicated and difficult from a young age. Michael witnessed his parents repeatedly physically and mentally abusing each other, and he himself was also subjected to this abuse. When Michael was young, his father went to prison for unclear reasons, leaving him feeling empty and deeply affected. His mother remarried and had another son, Dana, bringing some happiness to Michael's life. However, their home life remained troubled. Michael's stepfather had trouble maintaining stable employment, which put a financial strain on his mother, forcing her to work 2 jobs to support the family. The stepfather was aggressive toward Michael and Dana. He used physical punishment. This has created an atmosphere that makes people feel scared and controlled. Michael was harshly punished for small mistakes, such as being late to school, and was often locked in a shed and subjected to sexual abuse. Michael's difficult life did not harden him. Instead, he showed kindness and a strong instinct to protect others, particularly his younger brother Dana. He is often the one to admit mistakes and take punishment for Dana, which brings the 2 brothers closer. Dana admired Michael's courage and love. Michael's stepfather was extremely controlling and rarely allowed him to interact with other children. His mother was too afraid of her husband to stand up for Michael or herself. This created a home environment that was isolated, secretive, and oppressive. With no outside help, Michael and Dana suffered ongoing abuse. The neighbors suspected that something was wrong in the household. In a desperate attempt to escape, Michael ran away from home but didn't know where to go. He was eventually found by authorities and shared the sad story of his family life. Unfortunately, no one helped him with his situation. Michael had difficulty expressing his genuine emotions, instead concealing them beneath a facade of indifference. He struggled with depression in his teenage years, which significantly impacted his mental well-being. However, at school, he found some relief from his struggles. Despite being introverted and feeling lonely, having responsibilities helped distract him from his difficult home life. Fortunately, Michael met Dorothy, a local business owner. Dorothy introduced him to her daughter, and although the daughter's name is not known, but Michael formed a strong bond with her. As time passed, their friendship blossomed into romance, navigating its share of highs and lows. This relationship brought out Michael's gentle, thoughtful, and cautious nature, revealing a more nuanced side of his personality. Dorothy was happy to see Michael in a new light, but at the same time, she felt concerned. She observed that he became uneasy whenever it was time to go home. Despite her daughter's frequent visits with Michael, he made a concerted effort to keep her away from his residence. Concerned by these signs, Dorothy decided to have deeper conversations with Michael. Michael eventually opened up to Dorothy about his concerns for his mother and brother's well-being. This enabled Dorothy to recognize the emotional burden and suffering that Michael was experiencing. After finishing high school, Michael enlisted in the United States Navy, which marked the start of a new chapter in his life. The Navy instills in him a sense of direction and purpose within a highly organized environment. As Michael developed a strong affection for the Navy, he realized that he had made the right choice. His newfound sense of happiness is largely due to his close relationship with his teammates. Although he would occasionally drink, Michael was always responsible and showed up for work, proving to be a calm and composed individual. During this time, Michael was dating a colleague. However, he quickly realized that the relationship was unhealthy when she became violent towards him. This brought back painful memories of his childhood. As his depression worsened, he realized he needed to end the relationship. Following the breakup, Michael dedicated himself to furthering his career. He pursued specialized training in combat medical care, which ultimately led to his appointment as a medic in the Marine Corps. Afterward, Michael met Sarah, and they fell deeply in love, eventually getting married. After getting married, Michael resigned from the Marines so he could devote his time to supporting his wife. Sarah had a positive impact on Michael's life, encouraging him to make good choices. Together, they had 3 children, and Michael was determined to be a devoted father, providing them with the best possible upbringing. In their relationship, Sarah often took the lead in decision-making, but Michael was always supportive of her choices. In 2011, Sarah found a job in Orange County, Central Florida, and the family moved there. She worked at the Mount Dora Animal Hospital, which was managed by Bo Delaporte. After Michael had difficulty finding a job, Sarah convinced Delaporte to take him on. She also emphasized the experience Michael had gained from his previous job. Michael quickly settled into his new role and showed outstanding commitment. Michael emanated happiness and had a clear passion for his work. Michael's positive demeanor made him highly sought after by pet owners. His employers, particularly Delaporte, grew fond of him, and their relationship blossomed into a strong friendship built on trust. Delaporte even entrusted him with some management responsibilities at the animal hospital. In 2014, Delaporte hired KCI, a new veterinary technician. Born on December 23, 1986, in Ion, Indiana, KCI was the second of 3 daughters to Nikki and David. She had 2 siblings, named Sarah and Brandy. She brought immense joy and positivity to her family, and also spread that energy to those around her. As KCI grew older, her love and concern for those around her deepened, fueled by her spiritual beliefs and moral principles. This gives her the strength to face life's challenges. In high school, KCI met Richard, and they were initially attracted to each other. However, as they dated, Richard noticed KCI's jealous and possessive tendencies. Her insecurity sometimes led to hurtful words and actions. Nevertheless, Richard remained patient and calm, and they eventually married after completing their studies. Over time, KCI's mother moved to Florida. Sarah and Brandy soon followed. Due to KCI's close relationship with her family, she and Richard relocated to Florida in 2009. After settling in, KCI worked occasionally as a transporter and sometimes as a dog groomer. She also began learning the trade of a veterinary technician. During this time, KC and Richard welcomed their first child, Cameron. KCI was devoted to Cameron's well-being and made it her top priority. A few years later, KC and Richard had their second child, Preston. The children grew in a happy environment filled with laughter and loving care. As KCI advanced in her veterinary technician career, she found a job at an animal clinic. There, she met Michael, who was Delaporte's right-hand man. Michael and KCI got along well, but Delaporte and Sarah both suspect that there may be something more than mere friendship between them. Even though both of them have families, but Michael found himself attracted to KCI. This attraction affected his focus and performance at work. Michael tried his best to satisfy KCI's needs, and she reciprocated Michael's feelings, and as a result they began an affair. Sarah and Michael decided to get a divorce, as did KCI and her spouse, Richard. After the divorce, Sarah was granted custody of her 3 children and relocated to Jacksonville. In contrast, KCI and Richard chose to share custody of their children, Cameron and Preston, according to a certain rule. KCI took her parenting responsibilities seriously and made sure to transport the children as agreed. Delaporte's frustration increased as Michael's work performance at the clinic continued to deteriorate. To make matters worse, Michael inappropriately approached other employees, overstepping professional boundaries. A betrayal occurred when Michael asked for time off, claiming his mother had passed away, only to use the leave for a beach vacation. Delaporte discovered the truth and subsequently terminated Michael's employment. Seeking revenge, Michael burglarized the clinic, stealing money, computer equipment, and even a gun. Delaporte identified Michael as the perpetrator and contacted the authorities. With KCI's assistance, Michael escaped to New Mexico but was eventually caught by the police. After serving a short prison sentence, Michael was released. Despite Michael's past actions, KCI remained devoted to him. The couple moved in together, and Michael became a stepfather to Cameron and Preston. Eventually, In 2017, around Halloween, Michael and KCI got married and started a new life together in a two-bedroom trailer. Although the space is small, the affordable rent makes them feel grateful to have found a place where they can be together. In the same year, they welcomed their first child, Mercalli, followed by Ayana the next year. As their family grew to 4 children, Michael took on a job as a construction laborer to support them financially, while KCI dedicated herself to being a homemaker. She took great joy in every stage of her children's development and sought ways to capture those special moments. This led her to create a YouTube channel where she shared milestones of their family life. At first glance, their life seemed perfect, with Michael appearing calm and KCI's laughter frequently punctuating their videos. However, their relationship was not as it seemed. Behind closed doors, the couple frequently argued, and their disagreements had become a persistent problem. KCI's distrust of Michael led her to regularly check his phone, and she became suspicious whenever Michael worked late hours. A heated argument broke out between them on the night of July 10, 2019, while their children slept. The argument started when KCI discovered a message on Michael's phone that made her believe he was being adultery. The confrontation quickly turned violent, with KCI grabbing a baseball bat and pushing Michael. Michael then took the bat from her and, in a state of blind fury, he repeatedly struck her until she died. Michael put KCI's body in a plastic bag and hid it in a closet. He tried to clean up the scene as much as he could. The next morning, he took steps to prevent the children from finding out what happened. He then put KCI's body in his car. To avoid raising suspicion, Michael continued to post on KCI's social media accounts in the following days. On July 26, Michael sent a text to Richard, pretending to be KCI, asking him to take care of Preston and Cameron. Michael also texted KCI's mother, asking her to care for Mercalli and Ayana. When Richard arrived to pick up Preston and Cameron, he found it strange that KCI was not there and expressed his concerns to Michael. However, Michael dismissed Richard's concerns, saying KCI had left town for a few days. KCI's mother had a similar reaction when she came to pick up Mercalli and Ayana. Later that day, Michael called Sarah and told her that he and KCI were separating, and he needed to take care of the children while she worked. He then picked up the children and took them to his home. During the drive, the children noticed a strong, unpleasant smell in the car, similar to rotting meat. Michael continued to visit his children at Sarah's residence for 2 weeks, driving back and forth between his home and Sarah. Meanwhile, the body of KCI remained hidden in his car. As the days went by without hearing from her daughter, KCI's mother grew increasingly worried. On August 10th, Richard returned Cameron and Preston to Michael. This time, KCI's absence was even more noticeable, and it increased Michael's concern. During their brief conversation, Michael apologized for causing Richard and KCI to divorce, and acknowledged the challenges Richard went through in his relationship with KCI. As the new school year approached, Michael realized that the absence of the children and KCI would likely raise suspicions among the elementary school staff. This realization led to a tragic turn of events. On a night that remains unspecified, Michael took Cameron out of bed and suffocated him, then placed his body in a suitcase. The next morning, he did the same to Preston, putting his body in a garbage bag. A few days later, the owner of the trailer park where Michael lived served him an eviction notice, giving him 2 weeks to vacate the premises. Amidst this dire situation, Michael went to pick up Mercalli and Ayana. When KCI's mother saw Michael again without KCI, she became overwhelmed with anxiety and had a nervous breakdown. Her mind was consumed by a single question: where was her daughter? Michael was driving with his daughters, Mercalli and Ayana, when he was suddenly overcome with guilt. He felt trapped and decided to turn himself in at the police station. However, when he reached the door, he changed his mind and turned back home. Upon returning, He filled the bathtub with water and tragically drowned his daughters. After their deaths, he placed their bodies in a plastic container. As Hurricane Orion approached Florida in early September, a state of emergency was declared, prompting many people to seek shelter. Michael took advantage of the chaos to transport 5 bodies, including his wife and children. He loaded them into his truck and headed north to stay with Sarah. During his stay, Sarah noticed that Michael never contacted KCI or inquired about the children, which made her uneasy. However, she chose not to ask questions due to her awareness of the marital issues. After the hurricane passed, Michael's neighbors reported a strong, unpleasant smell coming from the trailer to the property owner. The owner checked the trailer, first looking through the windows and then entering it. Although the furniture and personal belongings were still there, the smell was overwhelming, but nothing else seemed out of the ordinary. KCI's mother grew desperate as she tried to make sense of her daughter's disappearance. She suspected Michael might be in trouble with the law and hiding, which could explain why her daughter was also in hiding for her own safety. Rather than waiting, KCI's mother contacted the sheriff's office and requested a welfare check at Michael's house. When officers arrived for the welfare check, they found the house empty but appeared to have been recently cleaned. However, a strong smell of decomposition lingered, contradicting the presence of cleaning supplies near the entrance. Before the officers could investigate further, the property owner arrived and asked them to leave. Meanwhile, with the bodies still in his vehicle, Michael drove out of state into Georgia. He stopped near a wooded area and disposed of the bodies of Cameron, Preston, Mercalli, and Ayanna. As he continued driving and checked his GPS, Michael lost control of the vehicle and crashed. Although Michael escaped without injury, the vehicle was severely damaged. The police quickly arrived at the scene of the accident and were immediately hit with the strong, terrible odor coming from the wrecked truck. They find a suitcase in Michael's truck, and when they open it, they discovered KCI's gruesome body. Michael broke down and confessed to his heinous crimes on the roadside. He also revealed the location of the children, leading to his immediate arrest. KCI's family was devastated by the news, feeling as though their world had shattered. In shock and grief, they still do not understand why Michael could have so brutally murdered his wife and children. Sarah, in particular, felt an intense hatred towards Michael, a sentiment she had never experienced before. With a search warrant and new evidence in hand, investigators went back to KCI's house. Upon entering, they were met with a strong, unpleasant odor and a noticeable reddish stain on the carpet. The agents began collecting evidence from the scene, while the autopsies were being performed to gather more information about the tragic incident. Forensic results showed that Cameron sustained a fractured jaw with no other visible signs of trauma. But a towel was in his mouth. Preston was found with a noose around his neck. Mercalli and Ayanna were found in a small plastic bag together, which also contained a baby bottle with Ayanna's name on it and a pair of pink sandals. The cause of death for Mercalli and Ayanna was determined to be drowning. KCI's autopsy results showed a severe blunt force injury to the front of her skull and face, but no other signs of trauma were found on her body. When questioned by authorities, Michael remained calm and provided precise and honest answers. Michael even thanked the police officers who arrested him and said he felt he had no other choice. Michael provided a clear and chronological account of incident from the fight with KCI to his subsequent arrest. When asked about his motives, Michael said that his actions stemmed from the harsh life circumstances he endured, which led him to believe that his decision was the only possible solution. The tragedy profoundly affected everyone involved, but it was particularly shattering for Sarah. She found it extremely difficult to accept that her children had been exposed to and had lived with someone like Michael. As a result, Sarah struggled with mental health issues after learning the truth. Michael was subsequently charged with second-degree murder for KCI's death and 4 counts of first-degree premeditated murder for the deaths of the children. Michael pleaded guilty to the charges, bypassing a trial and moving directly to the sentencing phase. A 12-person jury then had to decide between two sentences: life imprisonment or the death penalty. The defense strategy focused on Michael's difficult childhood and mental health issues, highlighting various psychological disorders that may justify a reduced sentence. However, state prosecutors argued that the extreme brutality of the case worthy a death penalty. In January 2023, the jury unanimously recommended the death penalty, as required by state law. After a brief 99-minute hearing, the judge formally sentenced Michael to death. He also received a separate sentence of life imprisonment without parole for the murder of KCI. Michael's lawyer quickly filed an appeal following the sentencing. However, on April 28, 2023, the judge rejected the appeal and confirmed the original sentence. Prosecutors were pleased that justice had been achieved for KCI's family. Michael is still in prison, awaiting his scheduled execution. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Frank Spencer. Frank Spencer was born on November 10, 1965, in Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania, to Cyrus and Malene Spencer. As a young boy, his passion for active games and sports helped him develop a strong physique and spirit. In high school, his exceptional skills earned him recognition as a standout member of the wrestling team. With a curious mind and a dream to carry on the family legacy, Frank enrolled in a local university after graduating from high school in 1984. He completed his studies in 1988 and, following his father's passing, took over the family business, becoming the owner of Spencer's Auto Parts and Used Cars. A pivotal moment in the young man's life took place in 1997, when fate introduced him to Maria. They instantly felt a strong connection. Maria was known for her fiery personality, bold nature, and intense emotions, which captivated those around her. According to Frank's friend Paul Siciliano, Frank had always been drawn to free-spirited individuals, and Maria was no exception. When the couple met, they had an instant spark and enjoyed each other's company. However, not everyone was thrilled about their relationship, particularly their parents. It was rumored that Maria's father, Anthony Rocco Franklin, had ties to a gang and was even known as a hired hitman. He took an immediate disliking to Frank and tried to prevent their union for some time. The Spencer family also disapproved of Frank's choice of partner, so the couple decided to elope and rent an apartment away from their families. This allowed them to maintain contact with their friends while keeping their families at a distance. As time passed, their families had no choice but to accept their relationship. Maria and Frank eventually got married and started a family, first having a boy and then a girl. The family later moved into a new home. Frank was a hard worker, owning an auto parts business and sponsoring racing cars. His top priority and motivation in life became providing everything necessary for his family, especially his children. Maria initially took on the responsibilities of managing the household and caring for the children. However, she eventually shifted her focus to coaching her daughter's soccer team, despite having a law degree. Friends observed that, unlike her husband, Maria seemed less invested in their marriage. She appeared distracted and somewhat detached from reality. Her lack of enthusiasm for domestic duties and responsibilities was evident. What truly concerned her, however, was the family's finances. While she freely spent the money Frank earned, her indifference towards the children was even more notable. Maria's behavior in her marriage became increasingly problematic over time. Her selfish and eccentric ways led to her husband's growing discontent. He believed that as a mother, she should have become more mature and considerate of others, but Maria showed no signs of changing. By 2006, her husband had had enough and filed for divorce, exhausted by her constant scandals and inappropriate behavior. He was also worried about the negative impact her behavior was having on their children's well-being, and eventually, divorce seemed like the only way out. After deciding to separate, the relationship between the former spouses became increasingly strained. A confrontation ensued. Spencer was adamant that he should have full custody of the children, as he distrusted his ex-wife and believed she was incapable of providing proper care. However, not everyone in Spencer's circle agreed with his stance. For instance, his friend Ron argued that for the sake of the children's normal development, both parents needed to be involved. He strongly advised Spencer to negotiate with Maria and share custody equally. Despite this, Spencer was convinced he knew what was best and continued to demand sole custody. In response, Maria also demanded sole custody and was counting on receiving substantial child support payments. The conflict escalated over time. Due to his ex-wife Maria's erratic behavior, Frank had to call the police on multiple occasions. Maria would not only attack him, but also their children. Not everyone believed Frank's claims, however. That was until an incident in 2008 that validated his story. Maria got into a physical fight with her former mother-in-law near their child's school. The situation unfolded when Maria showed up to pick up their daughter, despite Frank's mother trying to intervene. It turned out that Frank's mother was justified in stopping Maria, as they had a prior arrangement that day, but Maria changed her plans at the last minute. Following the altercation, Maria took their child and drove away without buckling her up. The police pulled her over and deemed her actions a threat to the child's life and health. As a result, Maria faced legal repercussions, including charges of disorderly conduct. Frank also accused Maria of stalking him, alleging that she repeatedly followed him. Maria was subsequently charged with this additional crime. Ultimately, the prosecution failed to prove the threat to the child's life, and Maria agreed to plead guilty to disorderly conduct and stalking in exchange for the dropped charges. Maria ultimately admitted her guilt and was fined $600. Yet this did not deter her from continuing her disruptive behavior. In fact, she became even more bitter and resentful following the incident. Frank's friends and family members began to hear more frequent complaints from him as Maria's threats and stalking intensified. Some of Maria's colleagues even revealed that she had openly expressed her hatred for Frank and threatened to take his life. This prompted one of her coworkers to jokingly refer to her as the Black Widow. Despite Maria's aggressive behavior, Frank attempted to remain calm and composed. He made multiple attempts to reason with his former partner, but she refused to back down. As a precaution, Frank started documenting all their conflicts, not to provoke legal action against Maria, but to protect himself in case something went wrong. His sole desire was to live and work in peace, but Maria's behavior had clearly crossed the line. By 2009, Frank and Maria's divorce had dragged on for years, with the children remaining in Maria's care. Despite his struggles, Frank eventually found solace in a new relationship with Julie Dent. However, it wasn't long before Maria discovered Frank's new romance. Although she claimed not to be bothered by Frank's relationship with Julie, in reality, she was deeply upset that Julie was forming bonds with her children. Frank, on the other hand, believed that Maria's intense jealousy was the root of all their troubles. This realization only fueled Maria's anger, culminating in a threatening voicemail to Julie in February 2009, warning her to stay away from her kids. The situation took a turn for the worse when the main character's father-in-law, Rocco, was released from prison after serving a 5-year sentence for fraud. Having spent time behind bars only seemed to worsen Rocco's notorious reputation, and Frank knew from past experiences that this spelled trouble. Many people believed that Maria had inherited her father's troublesome nature. This development made Frank's circle notice that he had become increasingly pensive and worried, and with good reason. The first incident following Rocco's release was a break-in at Frank's office, where important documents related to the divorce proceedings were stolen. The next day, Maria contacted her ex-husband and hinted that she had found a trash bag containing some interesting items on her porch. Frank understood what she was getting at and advised her to return the stolen goods. He also reported the incident to the police, but unfortunately, they were unable to find any evidence linking anyone to the crime. While the investigation was unable to prove anyone's involvement, it was clear to everyone that Maria and her father had a motive. The ex-wife was also considered a suspect, but in the end, the case was dismissed due to lack of evidence. Meanwhile, thanks to the authorities' efforts, Maria returned the stolen documents to their rightful owner. It seemed that the documents didn't contain anything substantial that could be used in court anyway. The failure to gather evidence was seen by Frank's adversaries as a green light to act with impunity. The situation grew more intense. Afterwards, the ex-partner began making threats on social media. She remained unhappy that the kids were in touch with Julie. In contrast, the new partner remained calm and composed. She took pleasure in spending time with her partner and his children. She avoided getting involved in the complex relationships between her ex-husband and his former spouses. But she was furious that Maria's desire for revenge had led her to neglect her parental responsibilities. The disputes dragged on until 2010, when Frank finally lost patience. He could no longer tolerate the situation and turned to the authorities for help. He asked the police to evaluate his ex-wife's behavior and provided them with their correspondence, which included implicit threats. However, Maria insisted that this was simply her communication style and that she didn't mean to threaten anyone. Once again, it was impossible to prove her guilt, as her warnings were too vague to be taken as concrete threats. Frank's tormentor got away with it again. In January 2010, disaster struck Frank once more. He and his partner had planned a romantic getaway to the Caribbean, but the night before they were due to leave, a fire broke out at his mother's house. Although no one was injured, the property was completely destroyed by the flames and smoke. Witnesses reported that a car driven by Maria, accompanied by neighbors and acquaintances, pulled up outside the house. The woman behind the wheel was seen smiling as she watched the scene before driving off. Tragically, after the fire had been extinguished, a dog belonging to one of Frank's children was found dead in the ashes. Frank was forced to call the police again, but despite their suspicions, no one believed the fire was anything other than an accident. It was clear, however, that Maria would stop at nothing to get what she wanted. Yet, with no evidence of deliberate arson surviving the blaze, the fire was ruled an accident. After sending a message to Frank, in which she subtly gloated about how karma had caught up with him, the frenzied woman started sending similar messages to Julie too. As the police failed to take action, Maria became increasingly audacious, eventually feeling bold enough to make public threats against her ex and his new partner. A few months later, a fire broke out at Julie's house, where she was home at the time. Fortunately, she escaped by jumping off the porch roof and was unharmed, although her home was left uninhabitable. In response, Frank invited Julie to move in with him, which the young couple feared would only enrage his ex further, but they had no other choice. At the same time, an investigation into the cause of the fire was underway. The similarity in the method used suggested that it was the same person or people responsible. Although the woman's home was located in a different county, the couple hoped for an unbiased investigation by the police. Unfortunately, the lack of evidence meant they were unable to assist, and the fire could have been dismissed as a freak accident. However, Julie was resolute and appealed to higher authorities, which unexpectedly moved the investigation forward. The search of the suspect's backyard yielded flares, including a damaged one lying in the grass. Another flare, similar to the one that had caused the fire, was also discovered. Furthermore, experts found that the steps on the home's terrace had been soaked with a flammable mixture. After thorough inspections and expert analysis, arson was officially declared as the cause of the fire. Despite this, the lack of direct evidence once again meant that the perpetrators escaped punishment. Summer 2012 was unseasonably cold. In June of that year, Frank and Julie faked a breakup as part of a clever plan to throw Maria off guard. This was followed by the real final demise of the Spencer marriage. But the hoped-for peace didn't materialize. Just weeks later, on July 3rd, Frank was tragically found dead. Joe, a close friend, decided to visit him because he hadn't heard from Frank in a while, which didn't come as a shock to anyone. Frank had recently gone through a divorce and was seeking solitude. However, there was an urgent matter to attend to. For years, the friends had been teammates in a recreational karting league with their kids, and they were in the middle of a crucial series that they were determined to win. But unexpected setbacks could jeopardize their chances of success. Since Frank wasn't responding to phone calls, Joe decided to visit him in person. When Joe arrived at the cottage, he grew anxious. The front door was slightly open, and there were suspicious stains near the threshold. His worst fears were confirmed as soon as he stepped inside the house. He found his friend Frank lying lifeless on the floor. Despite the gruesome scene, Frank's face looked peaceful, as if he had finally found the tranquility he had been searching for. As Joe walked around the body, he noticed dried blood in Frank's ear. Without delay, Joe called emergency services as an accidental witness to the scene. When news of the shocking incident spread throughout the district, the culprit behind the horrific crime was instantly suspected. However, it was up to the detectives to gather concrete evidence and piece together the puzzle on their own. Upon arriving at the scene, forensic experts discovered a gruesome sight, with large pools of blood and several long drag marks. Furthermore, they found a clear shoe print on the floor and blood-stained gloves in the kitchen. These crucial pieces of physical evidence were sent to the lab for further analysis. A further investigation revealed that the bloody shoe print found at the scene matched the size of the shoes worn by Rocco, who is Maria's father. Additionally, skin cells from Frank's ex-wife were discovered inside the gloves that were examined. Notably, the ex-wife had not lived with the deceased for over a year, which means it was highly unlikely that the gloves containing her fresh DNA were left at the house by accident. Overall, all the evidence gathered suggested that both Rocco and Frank's ex-wife were involved in the crime. Soon, the suspects were detained. Autopsy and ballistics analysis determined that Frank Spencer had been shot with two different types of weapons. The first bullet was fired from a .30 caliber sniper rifle as he stood by the front door. Forensic experts found a sniper's nest approximately 115 feet from the house. The bullet passed through his hand and penetrated his chest, striking a vital artery. The shot was fatal. However, the attackers did not stop there. They dragged the poor man inside, where a final taunting shot was fired into his head with a .357 Magnum revolver. By that time, the man was already deceased. Therefore, the final shot was seen as an act of revenge. It was clear that the shooter harbored hatred toward his victim. Consequently, police speculated that Rocco fired from the rifle, while Maria finished what was started. Additionally, it was discovered that alongside the crime, Frank's car and dog were missing from the house, exposing Rocco and Maria. By reviewing traffic cameras, Spencer's car was spotted on a federal highway moving away from the victim's house shortly after the crime. Unfortunately, it was not possible to identify the driver. Eventually, the vehicle was found in Sunbury, Pennsylvania, 27 miles from Frank's home and 5 miles from Maria's residence. However, no fingerprints or other evidence were discovered inside the car. Regarding the victim's dog, it was found 2 days after the incident, having wandered into a wedding in Dauphin. Attendees immediately realized that the well-groomed animal had an owner thanks to a microchip. The dog was returned to Spencer's mother. It turned out that Frank had gotten a new pet for his children after the fire. This fortunate discovery helped clarify some aspects and effectively exposed the crime. According to the investigation, the criminals took the dog when they fled the scene. On their way home, Rocco stopped, and during this time, attracted by nearby food smells, the dog managed to escape. Subsequently, it ended up at a house where a wedding ceremony was taking place. This allowed detectives to prove that Rocco's phone pinged near the celebration site on the day of the crime, while his residence in Harrisburg was 12 miles away, contradicting his assertion that he was at home. Likely, it was Maria's idea to take the dog to the children, but this decision proved to be a mistake. During questioning, Rue admitted that his son-in-law had repeatedly asked him for help and had visited him the day before his death, which explains the traces found at the crime scene. However, Rocco could not explain the presence of a blood pool, and his statement sounded insincere. No one could confirm whether the men got along well or otherwise. Rocco also confessed that Frank had given him the vehicle to use that same day, apparently to justify his fingerprints in the victim's home. By doing so, he essentially admitted to being at the crime scene the day before. Searches were organized at the homes of Rocco and his daughter to find the crime weapons, but the seasoned criminal knew how to dispose of firearms, so neither the rifle nor the revolver was found. Ultimately, it would not have been difficult for him to dispose of the crime weapon. Maria also refused to admit her guilt. She insisted that the glove ended up in her ex's house by accident, possibly moved by the children on one of the days. In the end, the suspects were released home. However, detectives did not close the case and continued to gather necessary evidence. Meanwhile, Frank's friend Derek Reed managed to talk to the former friend during a school football match. During their conversation, Maria confessed that the last thing her husband saw before his death was her face. Her statement sounded odd. The investigation received heightened attention from the state's attorney general, who was extremely upset with the authorities' indifference to Frank's reports and statements. Moreover, the police received numerous complaints about their incompetence. An internal investigation was unavoidable. Unfortunately, it was not possible to prove the officers' negligent attitude towards their duty. According to the police, much information provided by Spencer lacked solid evidence, and the only person who could confirm or refute the officers' words was deceased. The public and the victims' relatives were extremely outraged that their petitions yielded no results. Meanwhile, investigators tried to prove the suspect's guilt, not only in the crime, but also in stalking and other offenses committed earlier. In 2013, a major interrogation was organized. At the same time, Maria and Rocco continued to claim their innocence, denying all 12 charges against them. Their unwillingness to cooperate with the investigation led to accusations of providing false testimony. Prosecutors believed that the suspects arrived at Spencer's house together and chose not to use their own transport to avoid drawing attention. Thus, they fled the scene in the victim's car. In late 2014, Maria was arrested again. By this time, Rocco had managed to flee after the last interrogation. He boarded a plane and flew to Colombia. The investigation interpreted the man's behavior as flight and proof of guilt. For 11 months, the criminal was elusive. Eventually, he was apprehended in Buenos Aires, Argentina, after being arrested by local police and fighting extradition to the U.S. However, the criminal's efforts were in vain, and he was sent back to his home country. Justice prevailed in the fall of 2015. Maria's trial took place, and she continued to deny her guilt, shifting the blame to her father. The accused claimed she loved Frank and never wished for his demise. However, numerous witnesses exposed her true character, recounting long-term threats, stalking, and arson. The trial lasted just over a week, and in the end, the jury delivered their verdict, finding her guilty on all counts, including deprivation of life, arson, burglary, providing false statements, conspiracy, and making threats. Maria was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 50 years. Eyewitnesses claim that Maria smiled constantly during the trial. "I didn't end his life, so I tried to stay optimistic," she explained in a later interview. A few years later, trials began for Rocco. He was extremely displeased with his daughter's accusations. The defendant insisted he was merely helping her, but was against violence. It was Maria who insisted on the crime. However, physical evidence suggested otherwise. Finally, in the fall of 2018, Anthony Franklin was found guilty of deprivation of life, as well as robbery and arson. He received a life sentence without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 45 years. Upon sentencing, the 77-year-old man blew a kiss to the prosecutor and the lead detective before cursing the judge. Years later, Rocco sought a retrial, claiming his defense attorney had been ineffective, which led to his conviction. Maria also attempted to appeal her case. However, both father and daughter's efforts were fruitless. Every divorce has negative consequences, but for some people, it leads to severe financial problems and emotional distress, resulting in changes to their social status and lifestyle. However, with time, things usually stabilize. Frank Spencer's situation was an exception, as his breakup ultimately proved fatal. It's worth noting that the relationship he was in was extremely toxic. By staying with his partner, Frank was in effect nurturing a dangerous enemy and putting his own life at risk. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. Min Lin and Yoon Lee Lin's love story began in the late 1980s during their college years at an Australian university. Both were natives of China who had separately emigrated to Australia to pursue higher education. Yoon Lee through an exchange program, and Min, who was 2 years her senior, remained in the country for a professional internship. They met in a university corridor, which they later recalled as a case of love at first sight. They shared common roots and dreams, and both felt like outsiders in a foreign land, but were united by their aspirations to start a new life in Australia. After graduation, the couple married and settled in the picturesque and peaceful suburb of North Epping in Sydney. Their love grew into a large, close-knit family, deeply connected and devoted to one another. In August 1994, they welcomed their first child, a daughter named June Brenda Lin, who was commonly known by her middle name Brenda. Their son Henry was born in 1997, followed by the youngest, Terry, in 2000. Entering the 2000s, Min and Yoon Lee decided to start a business venture, opening a small newsstand. Their dedication transformed this modest beginning into a thriving news agency with its publishing arm on Rose Street. The Lin family's business prospered, enabling them to enjoy a comfortable lifestyle with a spacious home, a luxury car, and prestigious private schooling for their children. Min focused on business matters, while Yoon Lee dedicated herself to homemaking and nurturing their children. In their community, the Lins were well respected for their diligence, kindness, and charitable work. They were known as exemplary, caring parents who avoided conflicts. Brenda, their eldest, was exceptionally beautiful and an excellent student with a compassionate nature towards animals. The boys, Henry and Terry, were energetic and sports-loving, sharing a passion for soccer. The siblings shared a strong bond and were almost inseparable. As the Lin family settled in Australia and their financial prosperity grew, they began inviting relatives from China to visit, live, or even stay permanently. In the early 2000s, Min's parents were the first to move to North Epping, living nearby and helping with the children. Min's father also worked in their newsstand on weekends. A few years later, Yoon Lee's parents also moved to the Sydney suburb, with Min and Yoon Lee buying them a small house. Yoon Lee's sister, Irene, came to live with the Lins, assisting with household chores and the children. By this time, the Lin family business was generating substantial income, reportedly nearing $1 million annually. Their venture wasn't just a shop or publishing house. It had become a local hub where people gathered to read and discuss news over coffee. Towards the end of 2007, Min Lin's younger sister, Kathy Lin Nai, and her husband, Lian Bin Robert, also moved to Australia, seeking better opportunities in the bustling city of Sydney. They had visited relatives in Australia before and briefly lived in Melbourne, but this time they were determined to settle in Australia permanently. Robert, a former successful ENT doctor in China, decided to switch careers and try entrepreneurship. The Lins opened their own restaurant in Sydney, investing all their savings, but the business struggled and soon closed. Subsequent attempts to open a cafe or snack bar also failed, as Robert lacked business acumen and financial management skills. Eventually, Robert and Kathy moved to North Epping, closer to family. The Lin and Robert families were bound not only by kinship, but also by strong friendship. They saw each other almost daily, stayed in constant touch, and often gathered for family meals. Their last such gathering was on the evening of Friday, July 17, 2009, at the home of Kathy and Min's parents. Unbeknownst to them, this would be their final reunion. The Lynn family home was the scene of a gruesome massacre on the morning of July 18th. The Lynn family's shop remained unexpectedly closed, surprising their regular customers. The shop, which had operated 7 days a week for years, showed no signs of opening, with no notice or warning on the doors. This unusual occurrence raised concerns among the customers and neighboring shop owners. One of them, after several unsuccessful attempts to reach Min, called his sister Kathy to inquire about the situation. Kathy was both surprised and alarmed, knowing her brother had never closed the shop for a day without prior arrangements, often having their father or father-in-law cover for him. She tried calling Min and then his wife Yunli, but to no avail, as her calls to their home phone also went unanswered. Worried, Kathy and her husband Robert decided to visit Min's house to ensure everything was all right. Arriving around 9 a.m., they noticed the family car in the driveway and found the front door unlocked, but no sign of the homeowners. The house was eerily quiet, and calls for the family members went unanswered. The house appeared undisturbed, with no signs of forced entry. Kathy, repeatedly calling out for her brother, ascended to the second floor. Upon opening the bedroom door of Min and Yunli Lin, she screamed in shock and horror, staggering back at the gruesome scene before her. The room was completely covered in blood, across the floor, walls, ceiling, furniture, and curtains. The lifeless body of 43-year-old Yunli Lin lay near the bed, mutilated beyond immediate recognition. In the adjacent room where 39-year-old Irene, Yunli's sister, slept, the scene was equally ghastly. Irene lay dead in her bed, her face a bloody pulp. In the children's bedrooms, 12-year-old Henry and 9-year-old Terry had also been brutally beaten to death, their bodies lying in different corners of the room. Brenda, the 15-year-old daughter, had fortunately been away on a school trip the previous day and was not at home during the tragic night. The body of Min Lin was nowhere to be found, leading to a faint hope that he might be alive, possibly injured, taken hostage, or escaped. Kathy immediately called emergency services, but she was so hysterical from the shock that she struggled to convey what had happened. She screamed and cried into the phone, begging for medics to arrive quickly and try to save anyone they could. However, the first responders could only confirm the deaths of all the victims at the scene of the massacre. The morning after, a chilling discovery followed Kathy's frantic call to emergency services. Robert left to fetch the Lin parents, who lived about 10 kilometers away from the crime scene. The police and paramedics arrived within minutes, and what they encountered was immediately dubbed as one of the most horrific crime scenes they had ever witnessed. Tragically, it was too late for any member of the Lin family. Each had been killed by multiple blows to the head with a heavy blunt object resembling a hammer. However, the lethal weapon was nowhere to be found, leading investigators to conclude that the perpetrator had taken it with them. Min Lin's body was eventually discovered in his own bedroom, covered with a blood-soaked blanket. Like his family, he had been beaten to death in a similar manner. It appeared that he was the first victim, followed by his wife, her sister, and lastly the two boys. An initial inspection of the crime scene did not yield any significant clues or leads. The absence of the lethal weapon, combined with the fact that valuables and money were left untouched, indicated that the primary objective was the elimination of the Lin family rather than robbery. Initially, multiple assailants were suspected, as it seemed unlikely that one person could single-handedly overpower so many. However, evidence suggested that the children were awake and had desperately tried to escape during the attack, as indicated by blood stains and splatters throughout the house. Interestingly, all adult victims besides head injuries also showed signs of strangulation, possibly to minimize resistance during the assault. Identical bloody shoe prints were found in each room with a unique tread pattern, but the shoe brand could not be identified, only its size. No fingerprints were discovered, suggesting that the killer or killers wore gloves. At first, there were no leads or theories about the identity of the perpetrator, as family, friends, and neighbors unanimously stated that the Lins had no known enemies. The motive for such a brutal massacre of 5 people remained unclear. The time of the attack was established to be between midnight and 3 a.m. on July 18th. Brenda Lynn, the eldest and now the sole survivor of the extensive Lynn family, was on a school trip to New Caledonia at the time of the tragedy. She first learned of the horrific incident through social media and initially refused to believe that it involved her own family, hoping for some mistake. Her Aunt Kathy soon called her, confirming the dreadful news through tearful sobs. Brenda was quickly flown back to Sydney, where Kathy and Robert, her new guardians, met her at the airport. Brenda moved in with them as the Lynn family home was sealed as a crime scene. The next day, a grief-stricken Brenda was brought to the police station for questioning. However, she could offer no new information, insisting that her family had no enemies or ill-wishers and had noticed nothing unusual before her trip. Following her family's death, Brenda became the heir to a substantial fortune, including property in the family business. However, being a minor and still in school, her legal guardians, Aunt Kathy and her husband Robert, were responsible for managing the estate. Brenda's grandparents also offered their support, but Kathy and Robert insisted on being her primary caretakers. Robert even threatened legal action if the elderly relatives sought custody, arguing they were too old to care for a teenager. Eventually, the matter was settled amicably, and Brenda remained with her aunt and uncle. The Lynn's shop and publishing business, which had been temporarily closed, soon reopened under the management of the deceased, as Brenda was yet to take over the business operations. Robert also began actively reviewing the family's bank accounts, savings, real estate, and other assets. Investigation and theories experts repeatedly scrutinized the crime scene meticulously, documenting every detail. Despite their efforts, no concrete leads emerged. They deduced that the killer likely acted alone and entered the house quietly, suggesting either an unlocked door or the perpetrator having a key. The killer wore size 9.5 shoes with a distinct ornate tread pattern. The lethal weapon, believed to be a hammer, was never found in or around the house. The killer's use of gloves meant no fingerprints were left behind, and no foreign DNA was found, only traces from the 5 victims. A peculiar and significant detail was that blood stains were found on the doorknobs of each bedroom where the perpetrators occurred, indicating the killer's bloodied gloves touched them. However, there were no blood stains on the doorknob of Brenda's room, suggesting the killer knew she was not there. As one of Australia's most high-profile cases, the tragic incident was widely covered in the media, with no substantial evidence or suspects. Various improbable theories emerged, including rumors about the Lynn's alleged vast fortune leading to their demise, a robbery gone wrong, and even involvement of local Chinese mafia clans. These theories weren't entirely dismissed, given the area's history with a burglary gang, as the Lynn shop had been attacked months before the tragedy, and men had witnessed an armored car robbery a week before the fatal incidents, although the criminals wore masks and the men couldn't identify them. It was speculated that the perpetrator might have been eliminated as a potential witness. Months passed with the investigation at a standstill. None of the theories were substantiated, and no suspects emerged. The robbery theory was eventually ruled out as money and valuables were untouched, and the killer seemed to have a different motive, singular purpose to eliminate the household members. Additionally, the power was cut off in the house on the night of the fatal incidents, indicating the killer knew where the electrical panel was, as their familiarity with the house in total darkness suggested they had been there before and knew the layout, possibly even obtaining a key in advance, a crucial overlooked clue. While reviewing the perplexing case details, an investigator repeatedly listened to Kathy's emergency call, searching for any overlooked clue. Surprisingly, a significant hint was found in that recording. The recording captured Kathy's hysterical attempts to explain the situation, her words jumbled and interrupted by cries and sobs. At the end of the call, when the operator confirmed that emergency services were on their way, Kathy unexpectedly mentioned her husband's name, adding something in Cantonese, directly addressing him. This detail piqued the investigators' interest, prompting them to translate her words. It turned out Kathy was pleading with her husband not to leave her alone in the house. This was significant because Robert had decided to fetch the Lynn parents on his own, leaving Kathy at the gruesome crime scene before the police arrived. Robert's behavior seemed highly suspicious, as 5 people had just been brutally taken away from the house, and the killer could still have been hiding inside, making Kathy a potential target. Yet Robert appeared calm and simply left as if he knew nothing bad would happen to his wife. After several unproductive months, the police finally identified a primary and sole suspect, Robert. It was discovered that he had a key to his brother-in-law's house, which his in-laws had given him just in case, shortly before the tragedy. Curiously, Robert never mentioned this during interrogations, and Kathy was unaware that her brother had given her husband a key. Brenda unknowingly revealed this crucial detail to the investigators. Further investigation revealed that Robert's claim of being a successful ENT doctor was a facade. While he did possess a medical degree, he never held a stable job in the field. Rumors suggested he fled to Australia to avoid punishment for alleged bribery charges in China. In Australia, Robert failed to establish himself professionally, squandering the last of his savings on unsuccessful business ventures. After moving to North Keeping, he became essentially idle, relying on his wife's income and occasional financial assistance from Kathy's relatives. Once the guardianship papers for Brenda were finalized, Robert acted as if he had inherited the Lynn family's estate. His first move was to force Lynn's parents out of the house that Min had bought for them, though it was legally under the deceased name. Even though Min and Kathy's parents remained in the house bought for them, considering these facts and circumstances, investigators theorized that Robert was driven by intense envy of his wife's more successful and wealthy relatives, harboring a long-standing plan to seize their property, money, and lucrative business. Despite living under the same roof as the perpetrator of the crime against her family, Brenda and Kathy weren't considered in immediate danger. Brenda was oblivious to the true nature of her cohabitant, while Kathy was needed by Robert to maintain control over the family's assets. However, the police couldn't arrest Robert yet due to lack of concrete evidence against him. Interrogation, surveillance, and arrest. The investigation team obtained permission to install several hidden cameras in the Robert household, hoping to gather the evidence needed to prove Robert's guilt. The breakthrough came sooner than expected, starting with an unsuspecting revelation by Kathy during an interrogation. Kathy mentioned her husband's preference for a particular brand of shoes a few years back. Robert had purchased 2 pairs of sneakers from a limited edition series that he particularly liked. He had worn out and discarded one pair, but the other was still carefully stored in its box at their home. Notably, Robert wore size 9.5 shoes, the same size as the killer's. The key evidence came when Robert was captured on one of the hidden cameras, meticulously destroying the box of the aforementioned shoes. This footage led to a warrant to search the suspect's home, where a new pair of size 9.5 sneakers was found. The tread pattern on these shoes matched the prints found at the crime scene. Additionally, a small smeared trace resembling blood was discovered in his garage. Forensic analysis confirmed that it was indeed a blood stain containing the DNA of all 5 Lynn family victims, literally linking it to the crime scene. This evidence led to Robert's arrest, finally providing the concrete proof the police needed to take action. During the trial, shocking revelations emerged. Robert vehemently denied any involvement, claiming the blood found in his garage appeared after their return from the Lynn house. He also dismissed the significance of the sneakers with matching tread patterns found in his possession, asserting they were brand new and that he had immediately disposed of the old pair. While awaiting trial in prison for 3 years, Robert unknowingly shared cells with several informants. In one such conversation, he confessed to meticulously planning the crime and carefully covering his tracks. He mentioned buying the lethal weapon in a remote store without surveillance cameras and drugging his wife with sedatives in tea to prevent her from waking up and noticing his absence. He disposed of the hammer, sneakers, gloves, and clothing in a manner that ensured they would never be found. At the trial, Robert denied everything, and the only evidence against him were the statements from his cellmates and the previously mentioned indirect evidence. As a result, the jury couldn't reach a unanimous verdict, and Robert was released on bail in December 2015. The trial resumed in June 2016 with testimony from another informant who claimed Robert confessed to an obsession with Brenda since she was 13. This led to a re-examination of Brenda, who tearfully admitted that Robert had coerced her into a sexual relationship shortly after she started living with them. Fearing retaliation, she had remained silent about the abuse for years. With these revelations and considering other evidence, Robert was found guilty on all charges. He received 5 life sentences, one for each fatal crime without the possibility of parole. All his subsequent appeals were rejected. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. Lisa Holm was born on February 7, 1998 in the small Swedish town of Jo, where she had a peaceful upbringing with her parents and older sister. Known for her kindness, positivity, and determination, Lisa decided early on that she wanted to study architecture in Australia. Growing up, she traveled extensively with her family, visiting many countries around the world. As an independent young woman, Lisa worked various part-time jobs since her teenage years to earn her own money. Before the summer of 2015, 17-year-old Lisa secured her first serious job at a cafe located approximately a 40-minute drive from her home. Initially, her parents drove her to work, but after a few weeks, her father decided to purchase a scooter for her. However, during the first few weeks, her father followed her in his scooter to ensure her safety, given her limited experience driving on the roads. As Lisa only worked on weekends, her father accompanied her every morning and evening during this period. This went on until June 7th, when he finally let her drive to the cafe alone. Somewhere around lunchtime, her parents decided to visit her at work and have lunch together that day. The cafe was pretty crowded, so Lisa was really busy with work. She took a short break for lunch, had a snack with her parents, and they went back home. At 6:23 p.m., Lisa sent a text message to her father informing him that she was leaving work. However, just 3 minutes later, her father received a call from her. When he answered the phone, there was no response from the other end. Instead, he could hear some indistinct voices in the background, leading him to believe that Lisa had accidentally dialed his number. He assumed she was engaged in a conversation with her colleagues. Additionally, he heard the sound of a scooter door being closed forcefully. He repeatedly called out Lisa's name, but there was still no answer. Eventually, he ended the call and began waiting for Lisa to arrive home. However, she never showed up. An hour passed, and Lisa's parents started to worry. She should have arrived by now, so her father immediately thought something might have happened to her on the way. It was her first time riding alone on the scooter, and he was deeply concerned about her safety. He tried calling her several times, but Lisa's phone was off. After waiting a few more minutes, her father decided to hit the road, hoping to meet her along the way since Lisa should have taken the shortest route. The father, concerned that Lisa might have met with an accident, drove slowly, meticulously examining the road, but couldn't find her anywhere. He reached the cafe without any success in locating his daughter. As he arrived at her workplace, he noticed Lisa's scooter parked in front of the building. By this point, the man was already panic-stricken, having failed to find her along the entire route. The sight of her scooter provided immediate relief, making him think that she might have been held up at work for some reason. However, the cafe was empty, and he noticed something unusual. Lisa's scooter keys were still in the ignition, with her helmet hanging from the handle. This observation led him to suspect that something unfortunate might have happened to his daughter, as she would never carelessly leave the keys in the scooter and abandon it unattended in the parking lot. Meanwhile, Lisa's mother called the cafe owner in hopes of shedding light on her daughter's whereabouts, but the woman claimed to have no idea where she could have gone. She had called her employees around 6 p.m., and they said they were closing the cafe. After the call from Lisa's mother, the cafe owner immediately got into her scooter and headed there. On the way, she called 4 of her friends who lived nearby and asked them to help with the search. When the cafe owner arrived at the scene, they, along with Lisa's father, began searching both the establishment itself and the surrounding area. Their last hope was that Lisa, for some reason, might have decided to take a bus instead of the scooter. They checked the schedule, and her mother, along with Lisa's older sister, drove to the bus stop in their town. Unfortunately, this version was not confirmed. Lisa was not on the bus, so her relatives immediately contacted the police by that time. It was almost 1 p.m. and it had already gotten dark outside. The police immediately launched extensive searches. The fact that Lisa's scooter was left in the parking lot with the keys led them to consider the possibility of abduction. Cases like this are quite rare in Sweden, especially in the remote provincial area where Lisa's town was located. Therefore, the police immediately dispatched several groups with search dogs, while other officers began knocking on every house located near the cafe. When Lisa's classmates and her friends learned about her disappearance, they began spreading information about it on social media, hoping to attract more attention and possibly find some witnesses. The search continued all night, but it yielded no results. On Monday morning, the police publicly announced Lisa's disappearance and urged anyone with useful information to come forward. Around the same time, a man working in a barn directly opposite the cafe discovered a motorcycle glove on the floor and reported it to the police. The investigators had already inspected this barn on the evening of Lisa's disappearance, but had not noticed the glove there. They showed it to Lisa's parents, who confirmed that the glove did indeed belong to their daughter. This further substantiated the abduction theory, and the police deployed additional resources for the search. By then, news of Lisa's disappearance had spread nationwide, and hundreds of volunteers had joined the search effort. On Tuesday, the police received several more disturbing clues. Volunteers searched the area along a dirt road located a short distance from the cafe. There, they discovered a phone case, a receipt, a ticket, and a shattered smartphone screen. Investigators quickly determined that all of these items belonged to Lisa and concentrated their search in that vicinity. Soon after, they found additional pieces of the broken smartphone, Lisa's identification, and more receipts. All of these items were dispersed along the same dirt road. After the discovery of evidence, the police were almost certain that Lisa had been abducted. They put everything into the search, and more people joined with each passing day. The case became the biggest news in Sweden, and hundreds of volunteers poured in from all over the country. A local organization specializing in finding missing persons also joined in. The search effort for Lisa became the largest in the country's modern history, with over 1,000 participants in total. The police also received numerous calls with leads. One woman reported that she went out for a run the day before Lisa's disappearance. At one point, a man standing next to his scooter stopped her in the middle of the road. He spoke to her in English and asked for directions to a city she had never heard of. She tried to show him the way on Google Maps, but the man asked her to get in his scooter and show him the route on his navigator. The woman found this request quite suspicious, so she refused and continued running. She also shared an interesting detail with the police. The woman believed she had seen this man among the workers who were repairing the same barn located across the road from the cafe. Lisa's colleagues also shared one observation. On the day of her disappearance, one of the witnesses noticed 2 men standing across the road from the cafe, looking towards the establishment. She didn't think much of it at the time, but after Lisa's disappearance, she decided to share this fact with the police. The next morning on Wednesday, Lisa's father, along with some friends, went to search the dirt road where her belongings were found. Walking a bit further, he made several more alarming discoveries. He found Lisa's driver's license and her house keys. It all seemed as if Lisa was being taken along this road away from the cafe, while the abductor was throwing her belongings out of their scooter or other vehicle they used to kidnap her. The police and volunteers concentrated all their efforts on this area, but no other items were found. That same evening, a friend of Lisa's father was returning home from the search. Passing by the cafe, he noticed that the police tape had been removed from the barn where Lisa's glove was found. The man decided to go inside and look for any other clues once more. He grabbed a flashlight from his scooter, as it was already getting dark outside, and walked around the premises for several minutes until something shiny on the floor caught his attention. When he looked closer, he saw a woman's earring and another one just like it nearby. The man reported this to the police, who showed the earrings to Lisa's parents. They confirmed that the earrings belonged to their daughter. The police once again sealed off the barn and searched it more thoroughly. The lead detective later explained that on the first day of Lisa's search, their main focus was on finding the girl herself, so the barn was not inspected as thoroughly. They might have missed such small items as earrings, but now they brought in numerous forensic experts along with search dogs. This time, they spotted an odd clue behind a wall: human poop. Forensic experts say when crooks do terrible crimes, their body makes lots of adrenaline, sometimes making them need to go real bad. Like killers often wet themselves before or during the murder. Since Lisa's stuff was in the barn, cops think the perp might have took her there. So, they reckon this person, all hopped up on adrenaline and couldn't hold it. The poop got sent off for DNA testing. On Friday, the search area was expanded and volunteers reached a farm about 3 kilometers from the cafe. It was a facility with several large buildings where many people worked. The search team decided to inspect all the buildings. Shortly after arriving, 2 English-speaking men showed up. One claimed that the police had already searched the farm, but the team leader doubted this and continued the search. The men observed the volunteers for a while before driving away. The other day, the search team found a pile of wood behind the cowshed. Underneath, they found a helmet, a coat, and a motorcycle headset. The police arrived on site and confirmed that all these items belonged to Lisa. They sent police experts to conduct a more extensive search of the farm. Detectives also heard stories about 2 strange men who had tried to discourage volunteers from inspecting the farm. The police also recalled the story of a woman who had met a suspicious man while she was jogging. Meanwhile, forensic experts arrived at the farm together with the volunteers. They continued to inspect this area, and soon their attention was drawn to an old trailer. It was surrounded by tall grass and looked as if it hadn't been used in many years. But next to its door, the grass was flattened as if something had been lying there recently. Some of the grass was also trapped under the door, indicating that it had been recently opened. As soon as the forensic experts opened the door, they were immediately met with a strong smell of decay. Inside the trailer, there were many lockers for clothing. Apparently, it was once used as a changing room for workers. All the lockers except one were locked, leading the experts to suspect that Lisa's body might be in one of them. They began opening each locker and eventually saw that Lisa's body was actually in one that was left open, hidden behind a pile of old clothes and rags. Despite the small size of the locker, the perpetrator managed to fit their victim inside. Lisa had a rope around her neck and a large amount of tape over her head. Her pants were pulled down and her shirt was pulled up. Medical experts determined that Lisa died from strangulation. However, they found no signs of sexual assault. All of her clothing was handed over to the lab, while news of the discovery of her body rapidly spread throughout the country. All this time, the news of Lisa's abduction dominated headlines in Sweden. When her body was found and the public learned of Lisa's brutal murder, the case shook the entire country. Such crimes were extremely rare in Sweden, and people were shocked that someone could commit such a heinous act. The Lisa body been discover, something way day eerie happen. YouTube users come see one video we dem post 13 days before the murder. The video name na 13, and he get countdown timer. The name of the channel we post them sef they worry people, them call him Lisa home. News of the video spread well, people come they surprised. Some people talk say somebody don't predict the murder, but no be so. Now just be like say, person change the channel name and video title after them find Lisa body. Maybe the person just wants start a notatory or they play wicked prank. Meanwhile, the police were doing everything in their power to find the killer as quickly as possible. At the time of Lisa's discovery, investigators had already brought in 2 brothers and a woman, and they all denied any involvement in the murder. They claimed that at the time of the abduction, they were at home, providing alibis for each other. According to their accounts, the older brother, Naris, was asleep in his room while his wife was preparing dinner, and the younger brother was on the computer. Naris also added that around 8 p.m. he woke up and went to the gas station, where he bought pizza and cigarettes. The police were pretty skeptical of their alibis, as all 3 could have simply been covering for each other. They collected their DNA samples, but investigators still lacked any evidence directly linking any of them to the murder. However, this didn't last long. Forensic experts were working in the barn and on the farm, using all their resources and manpower, and their efforts soon paid off. In the barn, there was a small office-like room with a large window overlooking the cafe. While examining this room, experts found 15 traces of semen from men on the walls near the window and on the floor. It seemed as if someone had stood there, watched the cafe staff, including Lisa, and pleasured himself. The semen samples were immediately sent to the laboratory, and experts quickly extracted DNA profiles from them. All 15 semen traces matched the DNA of 35-year-old brother Naris. The same was true for the feces found in the barn. They also belonged to him. In the next room, which had previously been used for storing cow's milk, forensic experts noticed a pipe about 2 feet above the floor, covered in a thick layer of dust except for a small strip. The size of this strip perfectly matched the rope used to strangle Lisa. Traces of blood were also found on this pipe, and the DNA analysis confirmed it belonged to Naris. On the floor beneath the pipe, they discovered a piece of the same rope. Experts examined it and identified 2 DNA profiles, Lisa's and Naris's. This was a significant breakthrough for the police. It finally linked the man to the rope used to kill the victim. Furthermore, a hair belonging to Lisa was found on the floor of this room. Another crucial piece of evidence came from her jacket. DNA traces belonging to Naris were also found on it. Based on this evidence, the police believed that she was killed right there. They pieced together an approximate sequence of events. Naris had been observing the cafe for some time, and when Lisa was alone in the parking lot, he approached her. Based on the jogger's account, he could have asked Lisa for directions to a certain city or used some other tactics. Then, Naris might have asked her to get into his scooter to enter the route into the GPS system. Considering Lisa was kind-hearted and always tried to help others, she might have agreed. Once she was in the scooter, the perpetrator taped her mouth shut and drove her to the barn. There, he wrapped the rope around her neck and hung her from the pipe. According to the medical experts, this sight likely excited him so much that he defecated on the floor due to an adrenaline rush. When she died, he placed Lisa's body in the scooter and drove to the farm, tossing her belongings out the window along the way. There, he hid the body in the trailer locker, covering it with old clothes scattered around. All of this, from the moment of the abduction, took the perpetrator less than an hour. Despite all the evidence, Naris continued to insist on his innocence. His wife and younger brother had to be released because there was nothing against them. Once free, they almost immediately left Sweden and returned to their homeland, Lithuania. The preparation for the trial was intense. Naris just claimed he had worked in that barn for a long time, suggesting his DNA could have been present there due to his job. Additionally, he had an alibi provided by his wife and brother, although there were serious doubts about the credibility of both sources. In court, this could have definitely worked in his favor. On the other hand, the presence of Naris's DNA on the victim's clothing could only be explained by direct contact with her on the day of the murder. The police also found a witness who saw his scooter near the cafe shortly before and after Lisa's abduction. According to them, the scooter passed along the road between the cafe and the farm several times at the same time when Naris was supposed to be sleeping at home, according to his brother and wife. For several months after the discovery of her body, experts continued to examine all the available evidence using the most advanced equipment. Eventually, they uncovered traces of Naris's DNA on almost all of Lisa's clothing, including the inside of her underwear. Considering that the whole country was still following the case, investigators continued to search for any other useful clues that could impact the legal process and further prove Naris's involvement. They even went to Lithuania to speak with his wife and brother once again. The woman continued to insist that he did not leave the house between 6 and 8 p.m. But when it was the younger brother's turn, detectives suddenly got what they wanted. After telling him about all the evidence against his brother and detailing what he did with the 17-year-old girl, the man decided to tell them everything. He claimed that Naris actually was not at home that evening and only returned around 7:30 p.m. He was covered in dirt and immediately threw all his clothes into the washing machine. When the police started to question all the residents and reached their house, Naris whispered to his brother, "Tell them I was home at that time." Later, Naris explained that he was afraid he would be framed for a crime he didn't commit because he was an immigrant and had no alibi for the time of the abduction. The younger brother truly believed that his relative had nothing to do with it, but after hearing about all the evidence, he realized it wasn't the case. Lisa's funeral took place only a month after her murder. The church where it was held could only accommodate 130 people, but there were many more who came to say goodbye to her. Organizers even decided to set up benches and large screens outside so that everyone could watch the ceremony. The trial began 4 months after the murder. This case once again captured the attention of the entire country, so everyone involved in the process was under tremendous pressure. None of them had the right to make a mistake. Naris's lawyer insisted that his client's DNA could have ended up on the victim's clothing because he had worked in the barn. The prosecution, however, pointed out that this version made no sense, especially in the case of Lisa's underwear. The only way the suspect's DNA could have ended up there was if he touched the victim's underwear. The lawyer couldn't provide any other solid facts pointing to his client's innocence. At one point, he tried to push the version that the real murderer was Naris's younger brother. According to this theory, the brother somehow took multiple samples of Naris's DNA and placed them on the victim's body as well as at the crime scene. However, the lawyer failed to explain the possibility of such manipulations with the DNA. The trial lasted for a month, and Naris was found guilty of murder. He was sentenced to life imprisonment in a high-security prison. Given that this is Sweden we're talking about, the facility resembled more of a decent 3-star hotel. His lawyer attempted to appeal the verdict. In early 2017, Naris himself applied for deportation and was transferred to a prison in his homeland, although Lithuanian prisons are significantly worse than Swedish ones. The reasons for this decision were unknown at the time. The court decided to approve his request, despite the fact that providing comfortable conditions of detention cost Swedish taxpayers several hundred per day for each individual inmate. Later that same year, his motives became clear when he appealed to a Lithuanian court, and his sentence was reduced from life to 15 years. However, the joy was short-lived for the murderer, as a few weeks later, the court overturned its decision, and Naris was once again destined to spend his entire life in prison. Only now he had no chance of returning to the comfortable Swedish cell. 5 years later, in August 2022, Naris faced yet another downside of being transferred to a Lithuanian prison. While inmates were being moved to another block, one of them attacked Naris with a shank. he suffered serious injuries and died on the way to the hospital. As for his wife, the question of her involvement is still not entirely ruled out. Police noted that there is practically no chance of her direct involvement in the abduction or murder, as experts would have found her DNA on Lisa's clothing or belongings. However, it cannot be ruled out that she knew of her husband's crime and helped him evade justice by providing a false alibi. Naris's younger brother also raises questions. Cafe employees reported seeing two men standing near the barn and watching them. Considering that one of them was likely Naris himself, the second should have been his brother. However, the man's DNA was not found either in the barn itself or on Lisa's clothing, making his involvement in the murder unlikely. Perhaps they were indeed observing the young employees with the older brother and even discussing inappropriate things, but only Naris decided to commit such a heinous crime. On March 19, 2014, an emergency call was made to the police in Guamuchil, located in the state of Sinaloa, Mexico. The caller's voice was broken and pleading for help for his daughter. Officers rushed to a house in the Las Fuentes area. When they arrived, they saw the front doors wide open. Inside, upstairs, they found a man and his younger daughter, who was about 10 years, both crying inconsolably. The man led the police to a room where they found the lifeless body of a 16-year-old girl with over 60 wounds. This tragic news spread quickly through the city and shocked its residents. Nobody could comprehend who could take the life of such a young girl. Anel Baez Alvarez was born on March 17, 1998, in Guamuchil, Sinaloa. She was the second child of Idalia Alvarez and Hugo Baez. Her older brother was Omar. Later, they were joined by their younger sibling, Aid. During her childhood, Anel faced no particular problems. Although initially reserved, she grew to be self-assured with grace and charm. Her father worked as a tailor, and the family enjoyed prosperity and closeness. However, this happiness ended when Anel's mother was diagnosed with cancer in the early 2010s. The children had to mature quickly to care for her. Following a tough battle with illness, Idalia passed away in 2012. The family was devastated but did not waver. They supported each other through grief and tried to make life as comfortable as possible. The tragedy brought Anel closer to her sister. They shared everything, both sadness and difficulties, together. Despite these challenges, Anel remained cheerful and friendly with a passion for dancing and music. As she transitioned to high school, she emerged as an ideal daughter, managing household chores, looking after her younger sister, and maintaining good grades. One of her favorite activities was cooking for her family. Her desserts were especially popular. Anel also overcame shyness and became one of the most well-liked girls in school. She even formed a musical group where she took on the role of a singer, developing a fondness for the ballad Amor Eterno. Around the same time, Anel met someone who would become her best friend, at least for a while. Her name was Andy Elizabeth Gutierrez. They became an inseparable duo, drawing admiration from everyone around and being considered the most popular girls in school. They their bond through social media posts. On October 14, 2012, Anel uploaded a photo with Andy expressing her joy about their friendship. She expressed gratitude to God for the opportunity to be close to her, and even wrote that Andy had become not just a friend, but a sister to her. For a while, everything was wonderful, but over time, things changed. Despite being the same age, their personalities turned out to be completely different. Anel was a sweet girl who loved love songs and spending time with her family. Meanwhile, Andy lived in an unstable environment and became increasingly involved in what was known as narco culture. This urban community was also known in Mexico as Buchona. Andy was consistently present at events featuring musicians of this kind, such as the concert of the band Caliber 50 during the closing of the carnival celebrations in Guamuchil in 2014. The girl also held very clear political stances. On one occasion, she shared on her social media that she participated in a march supporting Joaquin El Chapo Guzman Loera. On her social media page, she wrote, "March for the liberation of El Chapo. We must join this great cause," which was accompanied by a photo. Unlike her friend, Annelle typically didn't express her ideology on social media and didn't share the views supported by Andy. As a result, the distance between them grew larger. In 2014, both entered Guamachil High School at the Autonomous University of Sinaloa, but hardly communicated with each other. Each created her own group of friends. Annelle started hanging out with Melissa Karim Manuel and Maria Jose, friends who led similar lifestyles to hers and followed her everywhere and admired her deeply. Maria Jose, who had known Annelle since elementary school, considered Annelle the mother of their entire group and assumed this role, always taking care of everyone. Despite maintaining a polite and orderly demeanor, she kept her distance from Randy and never informed her father or siblings about their dispute. Around this time, Randy's social media behavior became erratic. On her page, she started posting negative and troubling messages. For instance, some posts were highly alarming, mentioning things like pregnant 13-year-old girls and year-old girls taking active substances. Other posts were quite disturbing, such as, "My mom is upset that I killed my ex and buried him in my garden," or "Lucky the living dead she is envied." Initially, these posts seemed nonsensical. Randy often drew them from forums or songs. However, over time, her messages began to take on a more threatening tone. On February 5, 2014, she wrote, "I'm going to bury you by the end of this year." Then, on February 23rd of the same month, she posted, "I may seem very calm, but in my head I've killed you at least 3 times. And in the end, my mind is filled with new ideas every day." A few days later, Randy wrote, "Thank God no one hears my thoughts and everything will definitely happen tomorrow." The unsettling messages continued to appear with increasing frequency. On March 3rd, she posted, "Maybe not now and not tomorrow, but soon. I assure you I won't tell her anything then, but know that I have already mentally destroyed you." The last post was dated March 16th. She wrote, "This seriously drives me to despair." No one within her social circle knew who the threats were aimed at. However, rumors began circulating at school. Many speculated that Randy was upset with Annelle because they were no longer friends. Some even accused Randy of being jealous of Annelle since everyone adored her. Despite this turmoil, Annelle appeared unfazed by what Randy was posting on social media. Annelle celebrated her birthday with a large party where she wore a beautiful pink dress and was undoubtedly the star of the evening. Everything in her life seemed perfect until her unexpected absence on March 19th raised concerns among her family. Hugo received a call from the school attended by his younger daughter, informing him that Annelle had not come to pick her up as usual. Initially, Hugo wasn't overly concerned. He thought Annelle might have overslept or was with friends. After school, he went to pick up his daughter. The way, Hugo decided to call Annelle to ensure everything was okay, but she didn't answer. He assumed she was still sleeping. After picking his daughter, Hugo tried to contact Annelle again. She didn't respond. He repeatedly called her number with no success, and his worry deepened. Hugo headed home in the Los Fuentes area. Upon arriving, he noticed that the front door was wide open. Entering the main living room, father and daughter saw that some items had been moved. They thought it might have been a robbery. They shouted Annelle's name and searched for her throughout the house. She did not respond and couldn't be found anywhere. Finally, Hugo reached her room. He tried to open the door, but it was locked, raising his concern further. He knocked several times without getting a response from Annelle. Hugo then broke down the door. What he saw took his breath away. Annelle's lifeless body lay on the floor with numerous wounds and blood stains around her. He immediately called the police, who soon arrived at the scene. Seeing the crime scene, officers initially thought that a very strong person or group had committed the crime. Although there were blood stains in the room, they were minimal. It was evident someone had tried to clean them up. Later during the autopsy, the forensic expert determined that Annelle had sustained 65 stab wounds in total. Officers were convinced that this attack was carried out by someone harboring strong hatred toward her. Moreover, since neither doors nor windows were forced open, detectives believed Annelle knew her assailant and let them into the house willingly. They speculated she might have arranged to meet with this person that day. However, upon checking her mobile phone, they found nothing suggesting such an arrangement. No invitations or planned visits were evident on her phone records. Initially, Hugo wasn't too concerned. He figured Annelle might have overslept or was with friends. After school, he went to pick up his daughter. The way, Hugo decided to call Annelle just to check in, but there was no answer. Thought she might still be sleeping. After picking up his daughter, he tried contacting Annelle again, but there was still no response. Hugo called repeatedly with no success. His concern grew. Heading home to their place in Los Fuentes, he noticed the front door was wide open. Inside, some items had been moved around. It looked like a robbery might have taken place. Father and daughter started calling out for Annelle and searched the house frantically. There was no response from her, and she wasn't anywhere to be found. When Hugo reached her room, he found the door locked, which raised his alarm even more. He knocked several times without any reply. Eventually, Hugo broke down the door. What he saw left him breathless. Annelle's lifeless body lay on the floor with multiple wounds and bloodstains nearby. He immediately called the police, who arrived promptly at the scene. Observing the crime scene initially led officers to think that someone very strong, or possibly a group, had committed the crime. Although there were blood stains in the room, minimal ones, it appeared that an attempt had been made to clean them up. Later during the autopsy, a forensic expert determined that Annelle had sustained 65 stab wounds. Officers began believing that someone with intense hatred towards her carried out the attack. There were no signs of forced entry. Doors and windows remained intact, suggesting that Annelle knew her assailant and let them in willingly. They even speculated whether she had arranged to meet someone that day. However, upon checking her mobile phone records, they found nothing indicating an invite to anyone to her home that day. It appeared to be a random encounter since there were no surveillance cameras in the vicinity. Officers decided to interview the neighbors. A few of them reported seeing a slender girl with black hair leaving the house. These statements helped narrow down the pool of suspects, and investigators were no longer looking for a man or a group of people. Following this, officers began questioning Annelle's close circle. All relatives had solid alibis, asserting that the girl had no enemies, was very friendly, and they couldn't imagine anyone wishing her harm. However, detectives took an interest in a post on Randy's social media in which she expressed shock at Annelle's death. Some people conveyed their condolences, but others started pointing fingers at Randy as the murderer. They flooded the post with comments accusing her and claiming she was guilty of the crime. Randy deleted her account, but it was already too late. Police called several of Annelle's friends to ask about the connection between the two girls. All of them mentioned that they had grown apart, and it was evident that Randy envied Annelle because she was more popular. After these interviews, detectives visited Randy's social media profiles and found numerous threatening posts she had written a few months earlier. But that wasn't all. Just hours after Annelle's death, Randy wrote, "I'm a fool. Oh my God, what have I done?" Although these posts lacked context, everything pointed to Randy as the primary suspect in the crime. This information was kept confidential because officers feared she might flee before they could apprehend her. The agents patiently waited for the right moment. The case drew so much attention that hundreds of people gathered at a well-known funeral home in Guayaquil to bid farewell to Annelle. Friends, relatives, teachers, and classmates cried and embraced each other, unable to believe such a young girl had left life behind. Despite the large crowd, two people stood out with their presence. As soon as the girls entered the room, they began chatting and eating ice cream. A few minutes later, Andy suggested watching a movie. She then mentioned she was going to the bathroom, asked them not to pause the movie. However, instead of going to the bathroom, Andy went downstairs to the kitchen. She picked up a sharp knife and returned to the room, concealing it under her clothes. She noticed that Nell was lying on the bed with her back to the door. Seizing this opportunity, Andy took out the knife and started attacking her. Nell attempted to defend herself by scratching, pushing, and punching, but couldn't overpower Andy. Nell lost too much blood and eventually fell lifeless to the floor. becoming a victim of a heinous crime. Andy began showing signs of impatience, aware that she needed to act quickly as Nell's family would return home soon. She used all available rags to try cleaning up the blood, but could only manage to wipe away part of it due to its large amount. Eventually, she went to the bathroom, washed her hands, and put on clothes taken from Nell's wardrobe. Afterward, she closed the door to the room, leaving her best friend's body inside, and ran out of the house, leaving the front door ajar. When Annelle's relatives heard this account, they became furious. They knew that the story about the photograph was a lie. Annelle was not capable of such an act. It didn't align with her character. Furthermore, Annelle's friends claimed they had never seen that photograph before. They noted that since both girls were so popular, it would have been impossible for such a photo not to have spread, and someone would have surely downloaded it by now. All signs pointed toward envy as being the actual motive for this crime. However, at this point in time, motive no longer mattered because Andy had become the sole suspect in this crime and was officially charged with involuntary manslaughter. The legal proceedings moved swiftly. 4 officers escorted Andy into juvenile court proceedings at prosecutors' offices specializing in cases involving minors. After an hour-and-a-half hearing session took place, Andy was found guilty. Although it was clear that she had devised a premeditated plan and the murder was intentional, given that she was 6 years old, she received sentence of 7 years imprisonment. She was transferred to the juvenile detention center in Kakan. Annelle's family believed justice had been achieved and thought was done. However, they were gravely mistaken. The defense filed an appeal, arguing that the trial took place in Kakan, which was incorrect since the crime occurred within Los Mochis' jurisdiction. The higher court decided to reopen the trial, this time in the proper jurisdiction. Despite the swift process, the verdict remained unchanged. This decision sparked widespread outrage among the public. Hundreds of Mexicans and foreigners shared images on social media with posters calling for justice for Annelle. Several polls were conducted with over 5 million users believing Aren's sentence was unjust. Many felt she deserved a much longer prison term. The trial took place again, and once more, the girl received a 7-year imprisonment sentence. Hugo addressed journalists expressing his dissatisfaction. He appreciated that the sentence wasn't reduced, but felt Randy's age shouldn't have shielded her from a longer term. He hoped she would at least serve the full sentence, but even that didn't happen. On July 6, 2016, her sentence got reduced to 5 years of imprisonment. Moreover, it was also decided at this hearing that with good behavior, she could be released earlier. State police officers had to close the courthouse gates as numerous journalists wanted photographs of her. This case became one of the most high-profile in the country. Hugo wasn't informed about this hearing, which caused him significant outrage, and from this point onward, circumstances became even worse. On Friday, September 23, 2017, another hearing analyzed Ari's behavior in connection with reforms in federal juvenile justice law. The girl was released after serving only 3.5 years out of her initial sentence. Leaving court, Hugo expressed extreme dissatisfaction. He felt he had witnessed a great injustice. He regretted that legislative reforms appeared to benefit offenders rather than victims. In December 2021, the name Harmony Montgomery first hit headlines across the United States of America when a missing persons investigation was launched to find the 7-year-old girl. Since then, her father and stepmother have both been arrested and charged. A home where she used to live in Manchester, New Hampshire, has been searched for days on end, and the reward for information leading to her discovery has topped $140,000. But here's the strange thing. Before all of this, nobody seems to have set eyes on Harmony for more than 2 years. So, who is Harmony Montgomery? Why did it take so long for anyone to notice that this little girl has gone missing? Where has she been at all this time? And is it now too late to save her life? Hi, and welcome to Mysterious 7. I'm Michael, and today I want to take you guys through the story of little Harmony Montgomery, who dropped off the face of the earth back in 2019. Little Harmony wasn't born under a lucky star. Both her parents have a problematic history of substance abuse, and she had to cope with a visual disability and one eye through all of that. Her mother, Crystal Sorey, a resident of Massachusetts, lost custody due to addiction problems when her daughter was just about 4 years old. Sorey had to surrender Harmony to the state in the summer of 2018. After that, the girl's father, Adam Montgomery, secured sole custody in February 2019 and moved her to New Hampshire. Harmony was living with her father, Adam, as well as his wife, Kayla Montgomery, and their children at the property at the time when she went missing. The little girl had been in and out of foster care for much of her life, according to her files. Sometimes kids do get caught up in the legal system for years at a time. But Harmony wasn't one of the kids who slipped through the cracks of the foster care system. She went missing from her own father's house, and he never reported the matter, nor tried to reach out for help, nor find his daughter. So what exactly is his involvement in the disappearance of his child? Police said they first became aware of the case when they received a call from the girl's mother, Crystal Sorey, in November 2021. She had been trying to locate her daughter for months, but said she had been blocked by her ex-husband from contacting her. She said she last saw her daughter during a FaceTime video call with Adam Montgomery around Easter 2019. Sorey told the police that, since then, she unsuccessfully made attempts to find Harmony by contacting various schools and driving by addresses associated with Adam Montgomery. She said last year, he and his partner Kayla blocked all communication with her. According to news reports, Sorey had been sharing concerns over Harmony's well-being with Blair and Jonathan Miller, a couple who fostered and eventually adopted Harmony's younger brother Jameson in June 2019. The two were also actively trying to make a connection with Harmony and told Sorey multiple times they'd adopt her if the need arose. Harmony spent a lot of time in foster care with her younger biological brother Jameson. It seems that the couple, who said they repeatedly told Harmony's mother that they were willing to adopt the girl if need be, was very much interested in the hunt for the missing child. The couple actively tried to make contact with Harmony throughout the past 2 years, as they said Jameson missed her and that he'd cry at night for her. The couple said they weren't ever able to speak with Harmony and kept in touch with Sorey about her attempts to open a line of communication with the girl's father. On November 18, 2021, Sorey reported Harmony missing to the Manchester Police Department. Sorey made her first public appearance at the Candlelight Vigil on January 8th after authorities searched the last known residence of her daughter. "I just don't feel that in my heart," Sorey told reporters at the time. "Like, I don't feel like I lost her. And a mother knows. A mother knows if your baby's here or not. I know she's here." She had this message for her daughter. "Hi, baby. If you can see me and hear me, I want you to know that I never stopped looking for you, and I won't stop fighting until I find you, okay? You stay strong, and Mommy's right here fighting for you. I love you." Now, this is where the timeline of events starts to get confusing, and that's typically the point in any investigation when you know someone has been lying. Mrs. Sorey told police she had not been able to contact her daughter since they spoke on a video call in April 2019. After that, she said, Montgomery cut off all contact between her and her daughter. But Montgomery claimed to investigators he last saw his daughter around Thanksgiving 2019, claiming that Mrs. Sorey had picked up her from Manchester to take her to live with her. The criminal complaint says that Montgomery claimed to believe his daughter was living with his ex and did not show much emotion or reaction when officers said they were concerned whether Harmony was alive when they contacted him in December. His story was also contradicted by Kayla Montgomery's account, who said she last saw Harmony the day after Thanksgiving, when her husband said he was driving her to see Mrs. Sorey. And in some additional testimony, Adam Montgomery's uncle, Kevin Montgomery, told investigators that he had not seen Harmony or his nephew since late 2019, when she was 5 years old. Police interviews with other family members revealed Montgomery was allegedly abusive toward his daughter, including giving her a black eye, forcing her to clean the toilet with her toothbrush, and making her stand in a corner for hours as punishment. Montgomery's brother Michael Montgomery told investigators he had concerns that Adam was physically abusive to the child and was super short with her. Kevin Montgomery said he noticed Harmony had a black eye in July 2019, which his nephew confessed to causing by hitting her in the face, according to the criminal complaint. "I bashed her around this house," he said his nephew told him. Kevin said he contacted DCYF at that time, and he also noticed that his nephew subjected Harmony to other forms of abusive discipline, including scrubbing a toilet with her toothbrush and her being spanked hard on the butt. A neighbor said that it was a bad situation at the property, describing lots of people living there at different times, adults seen arguing in the street, junk left piled up in the yard, and the electricity is switched off at one point. The electricity was turned off and they ran the generator all summer with the wiring running through the window. The neighbor said the Montgomerys were basically squatting at the home when it had fallen into foreclosure, and Mr. and Mrs. Montgomery were refusing to leave. "We didn't intermingle with them as it was a bad situation," she said. "There were lots of different people living there, piles of junk in the driveway, junk outside." She said she went away for the Thanksgiving holidays in 2019 and returned to find the family had finally packed up and moved out. And another neighbor on the street where Harmony lived also says that the family moved on Thanksgiving 2019, the same time Adam Montgomery says he last saw the missing child. Manchester police said definitively that Harmony has not been seen since around October or November 2019, when she was 5 years old. Yet, a missing persons investigation was only launched in December 2021. Mrs. Sori has gone on public record to state that her daughter was failed by everybody. Despite multiple efforts to reach out to her daughter, or at least find out more, no authorities concerned paid attention. And the girl's father clearly couldn't care less what happened to the child. The last confirmed sighting of Harmony by law enforcement was on the 11th of September 2019, when Manchester police officers were called to the home on 77 Guildford Street in Manchester, where she lived. Police Chief Aldenburg, who is in charge of the case now, previously said the last police call-up to the property was in October 2019, but confirmed he had muddled the dates in a press briefing on the 12th of January. Despite the date change, the police chief said investigators are still working on the belief that Harmony was last seen in October or November of that year. Harmony's father and his wife were both arrested and charged on counts related to the missing child in early January. Adam Montgomery was arrested on the 4th of January and charged with second-degree felony assault, 2 misdemeanor counts of endangering the welfare of a child, and 1 misdemeanor count of interference with custody. On the assault charge, he is accused of striking Harmony in the face sometime in July 2019, giving her a black eye according to the criminal complaint. Officials said Montgomery is not cooperating with the investigation into his daughter's disappearance, and he has refused to say where she is. The day after her husband's arrest, Kayla Montgomery was also arrested on 1 felony charge of welfare fraud for allegedly fraudulently collecting welfare benefits for the missing children between December 2019 and June 2021. Mrs. Montgomery, who has 3 children with her husband, is accused of obtaining $1,500 in food stamp benefits meant for Harmony between December 2019 and June 2021, even though the girl was not living with them. Prosecutors have now dropped that welfare fraud charge and added 3 new charges, 1 count of theft by deception and 2 misdemeanor charges of welfare fraud. The charges accuse Mrs. Montgomery of making intentionally false statements about her stepdaughter's whereabouts in February and March 2021 to claim benefits. After the police investigation into the case amped up, several disturbing details about Harmony's father came to light. Adam Montgomery has a history of violence and a long criminal record, including convictions for shooting a man in the head in a drug deal just 6 months before Harmony was born. He was also convicted in 2010 for attacking 2 women at gunpoint. It has emerged that Montgomery is a suspect in the cold case murder of a 28-year-old man in Lynn, New Hampshire, back in February 2008. Darlin Guzman was found shot in the chest in the parking lot of the former White Hen convenience store in Lynn's Austin Square on the night of the 10th of February 2008. he was pronounced dead at the hospital. A source in Boston law enforcement told reporters that Montgomery, who was 18 at the time, and two members of his family, who were not named, had been the focus of the murder investigation since day one. The three family members had been in contact with the victim earlier that day and planned to meet with him at the convenience store before the meeting culminated in gunfire, according to the source. The victim's car was later found abandoned in the direction of Bedford, New Hampshire, where Montgomery lived at the time. No one has ever been charged with Mr. Guzman's murder, but the source said Montgomery remains the focus of the investigation to this day. Almost 14 years on from that killing, Adam Montgomery and his wife are now charged on counts related to his missing daughter. However, while charged with serious offenses including child abuse and welfare fraud, no charges have been brought against anyone directly in connection to Harmony's disappearance. So why was Harmony not reported missing for 2 years? Mrs. Sorey has accused the authorities of failing her daughter. She said she made multiple attempts to report concerns to child services. After November 18th, when she contacted Manchester police saying she believed her daughter was missing, someone finally paid attention. Police officers contacted the New Hampshire Division for Children, Youth, and Families, or DCYF, about the location of the missing child. Then, on the 27th of December, the DCYF reported that it was also unable to locate Harmony. Manchester police announced a search was launched on the 31st of December. Emails sent by Mrs. Sorey to the Manchester mayor's office, begging for help in finding her daughter, have also now come out. "Please, I'm begging for help in finding my daughter," she wrote on the 29th of December. In her emails, Mrs. Sorey said Adam Montgomery had never enrolled their daughter in school and that she has missed important doctor's appointments she's had since a baby due to a disability in her eye. The emails were sent just 2 days before police finally reported Harmony missing. As well as the repeated attempts to raise the alarm, the family was well known to child services. Newly released records released on the 12th of January have emerged showing that police officers were called to the Guilford Street home at least 10 times between February 2019, when Montgomery got custody of Harmony, and when she was last seen in the fall. Reports ranged from claims of domestic disturbances to animal welfare and concerns about the living conditions in the home. The DCYF was notified about some of the incidents. New Hampshire Governor Chris Sununu announced on the 12th of January that the DCYF is carrying out an internal review of its handling of Harmony's case. However, the governor defended the state's work, saying, "As soon as we found out that this child may not have been showing up for school for quite some time, it was reported up to us. The team got right on it. It wasn't a delay. It didn't sit in a file on somebody's desk." An independent investigation is also being carried out by the Massachusetts Office of the Child Advocate after Harmony was moved from Massachusetts into the custody of her father in New Hampshire in February 2019. Now officials in New Hampshire and Massachusetts are passing the blame between each other. The New Hampshire governor sent a letter to Massachusetts court officials slamming a judge for placing Harmony in the care of her monster father, giving his violent past and long rap sheet. Massachusetts Governor Charlie Baker responded to the criticism by saying he felt his pain, but said he wants to wait and see the results of the independent review by the Massachusetts Office of the Child Advocate. Investigators have revealed very few details about what they think may have happened to Harmony. The Guilford Street property has been a focus of much of the search, with investigators seen in the home and the backyard for multiple days. However, Manchester police said the search had concluded there. It is not clear if anything of interest was uncovered, and no other locations where searches have been identified. Chief Aldenburg insisted on the 12th of January, but they are still working on the belief that Harmony is alive. However, he admitted that he was a little discouraged by the case so far and pleaded with the public to come forward with information. He added, "Somebody out there knows something." Despite the national attention and the painstaking efforts to find the missing child, investigators appear to have made very little headway. Though concerning, the lack of progress is perhaps unsurprising, as whoever has information about what happened to the little girl has had a more than a 2-year head start on the investigators. On the 14th of June 2022, law enforcement officials were seen transporting a refrigerator and taking potential pieces of evidence from the scene at a Manchester home where Harmony Montgomery's father and stepmother, Adam and Kayla, once lived. Former FBI agent Jennifer Coffindaffer stated that bringing in the refrigerator is usually used to maintain biological evidence. If they found a body or body parts in a freeze, law enforcement would want to maintain the level of decomposition, Coffindaffer said. I have a really creepy feeling about this. It's not good. Several law enforcement agencies were seen outside the Union Street apartment complex, where investigators were focused on the second-floor unit, where Montgomery's father, Adam Montgomery, and his now estranged wife, Caleb, once lived. A woman called Darcy Hambleton, who lives behind the apartment complex, told a reporter that she briefly saw police enter the building on Monday, and it seemed casual. But by 9 a.m. Tuesday, Hambleton said she saw a full-scale investigation from her balcony, which included 6 to 7 officers behind the building at any given time. She added that she saw an individual in an FBI t-shirt and one man in a hazmat suit, and noted that the front of the complex is a media circus. Investigators were later seen taking a refrigerator wrapped in biohazard tape from the apartment and loading it into a truck. A camera was also used to search the sewer in front of the building. I knew about the case since 2021 when Harmony was initially reported missing. It's all over Manchester on signs and billboards, Hambleton said. But I had no idea that her father had lived behind me. Noting that she has a 7-year-old daughter herself, Hambleton added that her heart is in my stomach right now thinking that something could have happened to that little girl here. After this raid, Crystal Sorey stated publicly, I know in my heart this is no longer a rescue mission. They're looking for a body. In a disturbing follow-up, Kelsey Small, one-time girlfriend of the father of missing Harmony Montgomery, was recently found dead in Manchester, police said. Small, 27, was with Adam Montgomery when police found the homeless couple sleeping in a car on December 31, 2021, in the early days of the search for Harmony. The cause of death is still pending, but it does not appear suspicious, said police spokeswoman Heather Hamill. According to court records, police were on their 4th day of searching for Harmony when they found Adam Montgomery and Small sleeping in a car on New Year's Eve. The car was parked on Harvell Street on the west side, close to the Gifford Street home where the Montgomery family had lived 2 years earlier. Small told police she had been romantically involved with Adam Montgomery for more than a year. She knew he had 4 children from previous relationships, but he was not in touch with any of them and never talked about Harmony, she told police. She had no idea where Harmony might be. Police eventually arrested Adam Montgomery, but never charged Small with any crime. So what happened to Harmony Montgomery, and where is she now? If her father is innocent, why did he never report her disappearance? And when her mother, Crystal, tried to find her daughter, why weren't police and the local child protective services on her side? As this case unfolds, we hope that Harmony's mother finds the justice she deserves, whether her daughter is dead or living. Police have stated that Harmony is 8, and she should be wearing glasses due to her blindness in one eye. It's a heartbreaking story, and we hope with everything we've got that somehow, against all odds, Harmony Montgomery might still be found alive.